My stepsister ran off with my fiancé a week before the wedding, after sending me postcards for months. But karma has a funny way of working things out. I was 28 years old and engaged to my college boyfriend. We'd been together since we were 18, all through university, and got engaged when I was 23. We had been engaged for a year, and everything seemed perfect until a week before our wedding. That's when my fiancé, Greg, and my stepsister, Melissa, ran off together. They left only a letter for me. In the letter, Greg explained that he had started an affair with Melissa a couple of months after we got engaged. He said he realized he couldn't marry me because it would be unfair to both of us, and to Melissa, since they were the ones truly in love. He believed the universe had used me to guide him to his real love, and he couldn't deceive everyone any longer with the illusion of a happy future. That was it. They left, and I didn't see them again until recently. Greg's parents covered the entire wedding cost and didn't want me to pay a dime. They were embarrassed by what their son had done. After that, I had no contact with them, and we didn't have anything else to talk about. But my own family was furious. My father was so upset that he considered hiring a private investigator to track them down and bring them back to get answers. For context, my dad isn't my biological father, but I've always treated him as my real dad since he's been in my life since I was very young. My biological father left shortly after I was born, and my mom never saw him again. They had never been married. My mom remarried when I was 8, to my dad, who has always been there for me. Melissa and I used to attend the same school, which is how our parents met. But for some reason, Melissa decided she didn't like me and began bullying me for years. She was a true tormentor, and her friends joined in on making my life miserable. It wasn't just at school. She even kept it up when we were at home, always looking for ways to make me feel bad. I complained to my parents several times and they tried to intervene, but it was never enough. She didn't fear any punishment, not even from our parents. My school years were a nightmare because of her. At that time, my mom wasn't around much, and Melissa's mother had passed away when Melissa was young, so she didn't have much parental guidance. Whenever my mom tried to discipline her, Melissa would tell her that she wasn't her real mother and had no right to scold her. My dad tried his best to stop her bullying, but nothing worked. They tried everything from scolding to speaking kindly to her, but she refused to stop. Sometimes they even threatened to send her away, but she would dare them to do it, knowing their threats were empty. By high school, things only got worse. Melissa had adopted a lot of bad habits and was practically a delinquent. She started smoking, skipping school, and drinking with her equally troublesome friends. It wasn't until she was arrested one night, along with her friends, for breaking into someone's house while drunk, that our parents finally decided to send her away and get her the help she clearly needed. After weeks of protests and begging, my parents succeeded in getting her into a rehabilitation center for troubled teens. She wasn't happy about it, but my dad was firm, telling her that if she wanted to live with us and be part of the family, she would have to change. He couldn't allow her behavior to continue, especially when she was becoming a danger to society. She was angry and left for several years, not returning until after we had graduated. During that time, she lived with her aunt and attended a school near the rehab center. I didn't see her during those years, as I wasn't interested in how my biggest bully was doing. My parents visited her every weekend, asking me if I wanted to join them, but I always said no. Once she was gone, my high school years got so much better since I no longer had someone bullying me. Melissa continued her education at the rehab center and later came back. The first thing she did was apologize for everything she had put me through. She seemed a little calmer, and I actually thought she had changed for the better. So I forgave her. We were about to leave for college in a few months anyway, so it didn't matter. Once we started college, I moved away and so did she. We only came back for holidays, and she was much kinder to me after that. By kinder, I don't mean she actually treated me well, but rather that she ignored me instead of bothering me every chance she got, like she used to. Honestly, it was a welcome change because I preferred being ignored than being bullied. Our parents noticed the shift but didn't try to force us to get along or act like sisters. Given our history, that was more than enough for them. Then I started dating Greg, and after we had been together for a year, I decided to bring him home for Thanksgiving to introduce him to my parents. Everyone got along really well, and for the first time, I noticed that even Melissa seemed interested in the conversation. This was a rare occurrence since she came back from rehab. She and Greg really hit it off, and after I started dating him, she began showing more interest in being my friend. She would often come up to me just to chat, which she'd never done before. I didn't understand what was going on, and I had a small suspicion that maybe she liked Greg. So one day, I decided to ask her directly if the real reason she was trying to be my friend was because of Greg or something like that, because I was paranoid. She laughed and told me that wasn't the case. But Greg had mentioned how good his relationship was with his siblings during our first dinner together, while talking about his family. That had made her reconsider how she had been treating me since coming back. And now she was trying to make things right and improve our relationship. It had nothing to do directly with Greg, but he had definitely played a role as a catalyst that made her reflect on our relationship. She told me she had blamed me for her being sent away for so long, but eventually, she accepted that it wasn't my fault. She had brought it upon herself with her terrible behavior. So, it was time to stop punishing me for it and start trying to truly be part of the family. She said this wouldn't be possible until she apologized sincerely and actively worked on our relationship. I'm an emotional fool, and what she told me that day moved me. So, like an idiot, I decided to forgive her and be friends with her. I guess that's what hurt the most because she betrayed me. After we became friends, things went well for a while, and she was actively involved in the wedding preparations. I wouldn't say we were best friends, but we were no longer as bad as we used to be. We worked on rebuilding our relationship, meeting at least once or twice a month, and talking to each other. By the time I got engaged, we were in a good place. Whenever we saw each other at family events, things went pretty normally, so I never suspected anything. Even after the engagement, they continued acting like nothing was wrong. Not for a second did I think that maybe Greg had something with Melissa. It just never crossed my mind because Greg put on a very convincing act of being in love with me the whole time, while secretly deceiving me with Melissa. And she, too, was very convincing at pretending to be my friend. So, I didn't discover the truth until it was too late, and they were already gone. My parents wanted to track them down and bring them back to face the consequences, but I convinced them to let it go because I just wanted to forget everything. It was already enough that both of them had turned me into a complete fool and left a week before I was supposed to get married. I didn't want more drama. I was really depressed, and I simply didn't have the energy. I spent the following week doing nothing but working and sleeping, trying to avoid facing my feelings. My heart was obviously broken, and I was numb, but the worst was yet to come. A couple of weeks after my supposed wedding day, I received a postcard from Melissa, sent from California. But that wasn't all. She had included a bunch of photos of her with Greg, and they looked really happy together. It was so obvious that she was rubbing it in my face because she even mentioned apologizing for the surprise before my wedding. But of course, she didn't feel sorry at all. It was just meant to make me angry. That's when I realized she had never truly forgiven me for what happened all those years ago, and she still blamed me for getting her sent away. She had never really wanted to be my friend. She had just used me to get to Greg. I trusted her and let her use me. It was a really twisted plan, I have to admit. For days after receiving that postcard, I couldn't even sleep. I was losing my mind over it. It was such a traumatic experience for me, and I had to go to therapy for months to undo all the damage and deal with my trust issues. The postcard wasn't even an isolated incident. She kept sending postcards of her and Greg for months after that, but it ended after about a year because I didn't respond or engage in the drama. Our parents were really upset about it, and naturally, they cut all ties with her after that. They didn't even try to contact her after the first postcard, and that became a huge problem for Melissa. She had been ready to inherit her father's business. She was a business student, and that was part of the reason she chose that path for herself because she wanted to work with her father. However, after everything that happened, our father severed all ties with her and told me I could join him instead, because he felt he needed to make it up to me. But I didn't have a business degree. I was a history student, which didn't really align with business. So I had to learn the basics first. My father said it wasn't a problem because he was willing to teach me everything he knew so that I could eventually take over the business instead of Melissa. I agreed and started working under his guidance, learning how to run the business so he could retire and hand me the reins. After a while, I worked really hard, and last year I was finally promoted. My father retired, and it was an incredible feeling because I had started from scratch and had to learn everything. But now everything was running smoothly under my leadership. It had been going well for some time, and thanks to me, my parents could now spend more time together without worrying about the business because I took care of it. It's been this way for quite some time, and I practically stopped thinking about Greg after I started working for my father because that took up all my time, along with the therapy that helped me move on. I would say that now I've completely overcome the past and no longer think about them or what they did. I never thought they would reach out to me again, much less ask for my help, because that would take a lot of nerve and a complete lack of functioning brain cells. Asking me for help after everything they did, after they deceived me and made a fool of me, was beyond me. They truly lacked common sense for even contacting me. A few days ago, I was at home since it was the weekend, and around lunchtime, I heard someone frantically ringing my doorbell. I thought it was the pizza I had ordered, so I didn't pay much attention. But when I opened the door, I got the biggest surprise of my life. Instead of a delivery person, it was Melissa standing outside my house, looking really worried. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited in silence for her to speak. As I looked at her, I realized she was definitely here to ask for help because she looked terrible. Her appearance gave it all away. Even as a child, Melissa had always dressed well. But now, she was wearing old, faded clothes that clearly hadn't been bought recently. Her jeans were too short, and she looked like she hadn't been eating. I had already made up my mind that whatever she was about to ask, the answer would be no. She said she needed my help because she and Greg had been fighting for a while since he lost his job a couple of months ago. Instead of looking for a new job, he had started drinking, and although she had been trying to find work for herself, she couldn't because she had given up her career to stay at home and do all the housework when she first moved in with Greg. Because of this, she hadn't been working lately, and the gap in her resume made her a poor candidate for the jobs she'd been applying for. She said she'd heard from some relatives that our father had retired and handed me control of the business, so now she was here to ask me if I would be willing to hire Greg and give him something to do. Melissa told me she had come all the way here just to ask for my help, and she apologized for what she had done in the past. She said she was counting on me to get her out of this mess. She admitted she hadn't even approached our parents yet, and had come directly to my house to ask for help, because she knew I had a kind heart. She felt terribly guilty for betraying me in the past, but she was sure I wouldn't refuse her now that she needed me. Her sense of entitlement was so ridiculous that I ended up laughing in her face and told her to look elsewhere because I don't hire cheaters. I then slammed the door in her face and went back into the living room, ready to call the police if she didn't leave my property soon. Fortunately, she left that day, but she hasn't left me alone since. After her visit, the first thing I did was call our parents and tell them what had happened. They told me they'd heard from a couple of neighbors that Melissa had returned to the city with Greg, but they hadn't believed it. We live in a relatively small town, so everyone knows everyone. We quickly discovered that Melissa had been here for about a week before she finally came to visit me. She had been living with one of her high school friends, probably the friend who told her where I lived and also about the fact that I had inherited the business which rightfully should have been hers. Now, she was really trying to take advantage of that. A couple of days after her visit, she decided to go see our parents to tell them how ruthless I was being. She had hoped they would be on her side, now that she had the upper hand in terms of who was suffering more, but she couldn't have been more wrong. My father told her that the business was mine to run now, and that she no longer had a say in the matter because he wouldn't be overseeing me. My mother reminded her that she was the one who had betrayed me by running off with my fiancé after pretending to be my friend for years, and that she completely deserved what was happening to her now. She had lost the right to ask any of us for help, especially me, after tormenting me with those postcards. Melissa tried to defend herself, saying that all that was in the past and that she was a different person now. But my parents told her to leave because they didn't want anything to do with her. This led to her throwing a tantrum at their house, claiming they had always favored me over her and treated me like the golden child. She told my father that, despite being his own flesh and blood, he had never treated her the way he treated me, and acted as if I were his daughter while she was worth nothing to him. When he reminded her that he had made more concessions for her behavior in the past than any other parent in the world would have, she said it didn't matter. I had everything that was supposed to be hers, including the business I was boasting about. She even claimed that it wasn't her fault that Greg had fallen in love with her and wanted to spend his life with her instead of with me. But for some reason, she was the one being punished for it. She insisted that the postcards she sent were a genuine apology and that she wasn't trying to torment me. Honestly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about this since my father told me what she said. In a way, it's true that she was supposed to inherit the business and be in my place, but she really lost it due to her own actions. I had nothing to do with that. I never told my father to exclude her from his life and give the business to me. He did it on his own, and it feels somewhat unfair that she's blaming me for it. Also, what she said about me being the golden child is absolutely false, but I can understand why she would feel that way. In her mind, she was the one sent away, and for a father to decide to send their child away is a big deal. I know it was hard for my father, but again, it's neither his fault nor mine. If he hadn't taken the necessary steps, Melissa could have ended up a criminal or something because that was the path she was heading down. On top of that, I really don't think she was trying to apologize with those postcards. She was probably just trying to cover up her actions by calling it a genuine apology. I do feel bad for her because her husband turned out to be completely useless, although I dodged a bullet there. In fact, he came to me, and I can't imagine how hard that must have been for her. So, in a way, I feel sorry for how I treated her. Now, I have everything, and she has nothing, so I can't help but feel pity for her. That's just who I am as a person. Besides, so much time has passed, and I don't feel like I should hold on to that grudge anymore. But at the same time, I don't want to help her in any way. The most I can do is offer my sympathy, but I really don't want to hire her or help with money. I think it's enough that I even feel bad for her after everything she put me through. Most people probably wouldn't even blink an eye. The only reason I feel sorry for her right now is because this business really should have been hers, and now that I'm in a position of power, I feel like I'm finally getting my revenge on her. But at the same time, it doesn't feel right. Maybe it's because of what she said about me being the golden child, or maybe it's just imposter syndrome, but I feel weird about this. Am I the idiot for refusing to hire my ex-fiancé, who ran off with my stepsister, now that they're struggling financially and asking for my help? Update 1. I had no idea what to do, and the comments here only confused me more. Some said I was right to reject them, while others said I'd always been the golden child, and that's why Melissa started acting out. So this wasn't as helpful as I thought it would be. I decided to talk to my parents, because whenever I've faced problems in my life, I've always gone to them for advice, and this time was no different. They told me that I had no reason to feel sorry for Melissa, because we had all done everything we could to try to make her a better person. But if she wasn't willing to change at some point in her life, there wasn't much we could do for her. My father told me he had every intention of letting her take over the business if she had behaved and been a good daughter, but she failed at everything and completely mocked our family. After that, it would be foolish to expect him to let her take control, or even be part of the family again. That made me feel a lot better because talking to my parents always helps. So I'll try not to feel guilty about things I no longer do. Update 2. It's been about a week since Melissa showed up at my door, and since her visit to my parents, we haven't heard from her again. I almost thought she had gone back to Greg, until today, when she showed up at my workplace to make a scene. It was horrible because she just walked into the building, stood in front of my office, and started shouting about how I had stolen the business right from under her nose by pretending to be a good girl in front of our parents and constantly flattering them to get their approval. Apparently, I was responsible for slandering her by falsely accusing her of harassing me throughout our childhood and even talking to my father to send her to rehab, just to solidify my position as the golden child of the family. She kept ranting that the business should have been hers, but now I was refusing to let her even be a part of it because I was jealous that Greg had chosen her over me. Unlike our parents, who always favored me, and since I wasn't used to being overlooked, I lost it and went off on her. When I heard the shouting, I decided to go out and see it for myself. After calling security, I tried to tell her to shut up, but she kept going for a good few minutes until they finally threw her out of the building. I decided to call my dad before I called the police to get his opinion, and he was furious. He told me to go straight ahead and call the police. Fortunately, when the police arrived, she was still lurking nearby, probably waiting for me to leave the building so she could yell at me or maybe do something worse, like physically attack me. The police took her away and charged her with trespassing and disturbing the peace. These are minor charges and she'll probably get off with a fine or maybe community service at worst, but it will certainly be on record and that's never good. I told my dad that she had been charged and arrested, and I expected him to be a bit upset about it. But he just seemed exasperated and said he was tired of dealing with her madness and needed a break from it. Honestly, I feel bad for him because it can't be easy having a daughter like Melissa and being blamed for everything that goes wrong in her life, even though most of the time it's her own fault. Honestly, we've all been really patient. Update 3. Well, I think Melissa has gone back to California because a couple of days have passed, and we haven't heard anything from her, which is strange because we expected her to attack us after her arrest. But my dad asked around, and people told him they saw her heading toward the bus station the other day, so I guess she's gone. Honestly, it's such a relief that she's gone now because I really feared she might try something explosive to get our attention again, and that's always bad news. I'm not sure what she'll do now with Greg's situation, because it seems unlikely she'll get help from anyone else after this. I just hope they both figure something out and get out of this mess. I'm not even being kind or compassionate right now. I have very selfish reasons for saying this because I know if they don't find a way out, they'll just come back here with Greg and bother us more. I don't want that. So honestly, I hope and pray that she or Greg find a job and can support themselves. Anyway, I haven't heard from her for a couple of weeks at least, and I'm relieved that this nightmare is finally over. Am I the asshole for not telling my family I bought another car? They're feeling I am untrustworthy. Asterisk asterisk. So, a few years ago, I, 29F, bought my first car with my own money that I had saved up. I was so proud of it. Unfortunately, while driving my mom home from work one day, I got into a car crash. A speeding car hit the driver's side door, and my car was totaled. Thankfully, my mom and I were okay, but we both went to the hospital just to be safe. Here's where things started to get really frustrating. When I called my sister to pick us up from the hospital, she said she didn't want to lose her parking spot, so she never came. Instead, my mom and I had to Uber home. A few days later, instead of checking in on me or helping me figure out how to replace my car, my mom and sister started gossiping to the rest of the family about the accident. I was furious that they didn't offer any support, and instead of showing concern, they were just talking about it behind my back. When they brought up the car situation, I made it clear that I didn't want to talk about it. But what really got under my skin was how they reacted. They both said that I bought my car too soon and were worried about me driving. My sister even had the audacity to say it was karma that the car got totaled. I was like, what karma? I've always been a responsible person, and I've helped them countless times. So after that, I started keeping my distance from them in terms of personal matters. I just didn't feel like they were there for me when I needed them the most. Fast forward a bit and I bought a second car. This time I never told anyone. I live in another state now, so they had no way of knowing. I've had this car for almost 2 years now, and I just didn't think it was necessary to bring it up. But recently, I told a family member that I had a car, but asked them not to say anything to my mom and sister. Of course, that family member told them anyway. Now my mom and sister are upset with me, saying it's weird that I never told them, especially since I talk to them frequently. They feel like I've been lying about it and that it's untrustworthy behavior. Technically, I never lied. I just didn't mention it. They feel hurt because I didn't share this with them, and it's causing tension in the family. Honestly, I don't get why it matters so much. It's my car, it's my life, and it doesn't affect them. It feels like such a small thing to be upset over. So, am I the asshole for not telling them I bought another car? Am I the asshole for letting my brother, who I've raised since he was an infant, call me mom? So, I, 29F, have had a pretty rough home life. My mother passed away when I was 8, and my father has been largely absent ever since. I have 3 younger brothers, Jake, 26M, Sam, 22M, and Henry, 17M. This post is mainly about Henry, the youngest. After my mother passed, I became the primary caregiver for my 2 younger brothers. I did everything for them, feeding, clothing, making sure they were okay, while my dad gave me money weekly for essentials. That was pretty much the extent of his involvement. When I was 13, my father brought home a baby, Henry, who was only a few months old. I didn't even know he existed. This caused a huge fight between my dad and me, and we've barely spoken since. Now, I've raised all 3 of my brothers. My eldest brother, Jake, remembers a time before our mom died, and he resented me for taking on that role. During his teenage years, he'd often say things like, "You're not my mom," and I never saw myself as a mother figure to him. Sam, the middle brother, was a baby when our mom passed, so he occasionally called me Mom as he grew up. I gently shut it down, reminding him I was just Sissy and not his mom, but he always had a deeper connection to me. Then there's Henry. From the time he was little, he started calling me Mom. At first, I tried to correct him and tell him I wasn't his mom, but I gave up after a while because, frankly, I've raised him like my son. I don't know much about his biological mother, just her name, and I've never had a chance to get to know her. So, over the years, I've started seeing Henry as my son, and he sees me as his mom. Here's where the issue started. Yesterday, I was on my break at work, and I texted my husband, my daughter, 10F, and Henry asking what they wanted for dinner. Henry texted back, "Just some chips, thanks." Mom slightly smiling-faced. I thought nothing of it, but then one of my coworkers, 24F, saw it and got really strange about it. She thought it was weird that Henry calls me Mom, and started talking to other people at work about it. Now, about 60% of my coworkers agree with her, thinking it's strange, while the others don't really care. I explained the situation to her, telling her I've raised Henry since he was 3 months old, and that's why he calls me Mom, but she still seemed uncomfortable. I honestly don't understand why this is a problem. My brother has called me Mom for years, and I see him as my son, but now I'm left wondering if I'm the one who's out of line for letting it happen. I'm really just trying to get some opinions on this, as I don't see why it's such a big deal, but the drama at work has me questioning whether I'm missing something. So, am I the asshole for letting my brother, whom I've raised since infancy, call me Mom? Am I the asshole for telling my sister she shouldn't have given us a Santa? So, here's the situation. Today, while I, 25M, was at work, my fiancée, 25F, texted me saying that when she got home from work, she found a blow-up Santa decoration plugged in and set up next to our front porch. I immediately texted my family group chat to ask if anyone had done it. My parents, sister, 31F, and brother-in-law, 30M, all replied with a no. My fiancé, who was home alone at the time, went across the street to ask our neighbor if they had seen anything. The neighbor mentioned that they had seen my BIL's car. We knew it was his because it's very distinctive. Pull into our driveway and leave just a few minutes before she got home. At this point, I texted my sister and BIL saying that we knew it was them, and that we didn't appreciate the Santa decoration. I told them that it scared my fiancé, and more importantly, we didn't appreciate someone plugging something into our house without our knowledge. My fiancé and I are on a strict work schedule, and she's usually home alone for a few hours. It would have been easy for anyone to notice that, and it just didn't sit right with us that they did something like this without asking or giving us a heads up. My sister and BIL immediately called me, getting really upset. They told me that they thought it would be fun for their 2-year-old, who thought the Santa was hilarious, so they decided to surprise us with it. But I wasn't hearing it. I told them that I felt it was important to have boundaries and that, just as they wouldn't want anyone messing with their house when no one was home, we didn't want that either. The conversation quickly escalated, and they both started yelling. I ended up telling them I'd talk to them later and hung up. My sister then texted me saying, "We thought it was funny, but clearly you're both too scared. We won't do anything else fun with you." I responded by asking when they were available to sit down and talk things out like adults, but I haven't heard back. Now, I can see how, on paper, it seems like a harmless prank, and I understand they thought it would be fun for their kid. But I'm really struggling to understand the logic behind their thought process. Why would they think it was okay to just show up and put something on our property without us being involved? I want to make it clear that we didn't think it was okay and set a boundary without coming off too harsh. So, am I the asshole for telling my sister and BIL that we didn't appreciate them putting up the Santa decoration at our house? Am I the asshole for not mailing a previous tenant's old letters? I recently moved into a new apartment that had been vacant for over 6 months. When I checked the mailbox, I found several letters addressed to the previous tenant. Some of them looked important, maybe even checks, so I reached out to my landlord, who put me in touch with the previous tenant via email. I offered to meet her at the apartment to give her the letters, but she explained that she no longer lived in the area. She mentioned that she would be in town for work for a few days and asked if I could meet her at her office in Midtown Manhattan. For context, the apartment is in Brooklyn, which is about an hour away from Midtown. I told her I don't work in Manhattan, but offered to have my wife meet her at her office in downtown Manhattan, which is about 15 minutes from Midtown. We suggested some time slots, but she wasn't available at those times. Then, I offered to leave the letters in the building lobby for her to pick up at her convenience. She agreed, and we arranged for her to come the next morning. However, when the morning came, she called and said that her plans had changed, and she was no longer able to come to pick them up. Instead, she asked if I could mail the letters to her. Here's where I get stuck. I don't have a car, and the nearest post office is about a 15-minute walk away. It's not a huge distance, but I wasn't thrilled about spending 45 to 60 minutes running this errand, especially since I had already gone out of my way several times to help her get the letters. I suggested that she ask a friend or one of her old roommates, who was coming to the apartment later that week, to pick them up and mail them for her. She said she would ask, but sounded offended that I wasn't willing to mail them myself. I feel like I've already done quite a lot. I reached out, held onto the letters in my small apartment, and offered multiple solutions for her to retrieve them. But I didn't feel that going to the post office was justified when she hadn't really made much of an effort to pick them up herself. So, am I the asshole for not mailing the letters to her? Maybe I should have just done it, but I'm honestly not sure if I'm being too critical or if my frustration is valid. Am I the asshole for not attending my boyfriend's college graduation? I, 20F, have been dating my boyfriend, 21M, for over a year and a half. He's graduating college this Friday, but there's a bit of a dilemma. His college is over 1,000 miles away from mine, and I have a final exam the morning of his graduation. I really want to be there for him, but I have 5 finals to prepare for, and I need to do well, especially since I'm double majoring in 2 types of engineering. Here's where the situation gets tricky. My final exam is on Friday from 9 to 10 a.m., and his graduation is at 2 p.m. I looked into flights, but even the quickest ones take around 16 hours of total travel time, and they cost upwards of $700. I simply can't make the trip in time without risking my grades. So I told him I won't be able to attend his graduation. He was really upset when I told him. He said that he understood why I couldn't go, but his tone made it clear that he was disappointed, and he became really aggressive about it. He kept saying things like, "That's just reality," and how people would be asking where I was and thinking less of me. He also mentioned how others are making the effort to be there for him, even though it's not as far as my travel would be. I've repeatedly told him I'm incredibly sorry and that I'll watch the live stream, but he said that doesn't mean anything because I won't physically be there. He also said that he was really looking forward to sharing the graduation traditions with me, and I would miss meeting important people in his life. I asked if he expects me to skip my final, and he said no, but the way he said it made me feel like he was blaming me for not being there. I feel like I've tried to explain myself, but he keeps making me feel guilty and acting like it's entirely my fault that I can't attend. I genuinely care about him and want to make it up to him somehow, but I'm struggling to balance my academic responsibilities with my desire to support him. So, am I the asshole for not attending my boyfriend's graduation? Should I have tried harder to figure out a way to be there? Or is he overreacting by making me feel guilty about it? Am I the asshole for coming out in the family group chat and pressuring my younger brother to come out after my sister said something awful? I, 20M, am gay, and I've known for a while now. I've always kept it to myself because my family is a mix of supportive and not so supportive people, and many of them avoid anything controversial. I've come out to friends, but recently, I decided it was time to tell my extended family. I figured the family group chat would be the best place to do it, so I wouldn't have to have a bunch of awkward one-on-one conversations. I sent a simple message in the group, "Hey everyone, I just wanted to let you know I'm gay. It's not a big deal, but I wanted to be honest with you all." Most responses were positive. My cousin, 25F, sent a heart emoji. My grandma said, "We love you no matter what." And my dad just sent his signature thumbs up. But then things took a turn. My Aunt Sue responded with, "I just don't get why this needed to be shared. Some things should stay private." My uncle said, "As long as you don't push it on us, we're fine with it." But then my sister and 22F, who's married to a man who's openly homophobic, added, "Just don't be gay around my kids. They're too young to understand all that." I was taken aback. I replied, "Wow. And do your kids need to understand you being straight? Or is that just reserved for me?" She doubled down and said, "It's just confusing for kids. I'm trying to protect them. I would hate for them to turn out like you." My aunt backed her up saying, "She has a point. Kids don't need to be exposed to everything." At this point, I was really frustrated, so I replied, "Well, maybe you should have kept your legs closed if you can't support your children." This is where things got out of hand. My mom claimed I was being out of pocket and shaming my sister. My sister freaked out and said I need to go to the psych ward. Then, my younger brother Jai, 18M, who had been silent until now, suddenly sent a message saying, "I'm gay too, so maybe think about how your words are hurting both of us." Cue total chaos. Aunt Sue freaked out, saying, What is happening to this family? My sister accused me of forcing Jai to come out and said, "You're making everyone uncomfortable." He only said that because you pressured him. I snapped and replied, or maybe Jai felt brave enough to be himself after hearing your disgusting comments. God forbid your kids grow up in a world where people are treated equally. My sister lost it, saying, "Don't you dare bring my kids into this. You're trying to tear this family apart." Jai left the chat, and my mom texted me, saying, "This isn't the way to handle this." My dad tried to check on Jai, but he hasn't replied to anyone since. Meanwhile, my grandma sent a long message about how family should stick together. Now my mom is saying I should apologize for escalating things, and Anne is accusing me of ruining her life. I feel bad that Jai came out in such a heated moment, but I didn't force him to say anything. Did I go too far? So, AITA for coming out in the family group chat and pressuring my younger brother to come out after my sister said something awful? Am I the asshole for not letting go of the fact that my sister stole my Christmas gift in 2016? Okay, buckle up, because this is a wild ride. So, back in 2016, my mom bought me a Dremel kit for Christmas. Now, I was grateful for the gift, but the truth is, I didn't really need it or have any plans to use it. I had something else in mind for that Christmas, but it wasn't a big deal. My sister, who was a little more interested in the Dremel than I was, offered to take it back for me. She said she had the receipt and would give me the money, so I agreed. Fine, no problem. Christmas Day rolls around, and she takes the Dremel. Then the problem starts. She never tried to contact me about the refund. Weeks go by and nothing happens. So, I reached out to her and asked, "Hey, what's up with the refund?" She told me that she hadn't done it yet, but that she would soon. I thought, okay, no biggie, sometimes people get busy. But as time went on, I started reaching out to her every couple of months or so, checking in. Each time she'd say, "I haven't gotten around to it yet," or give me some other excuse. After a while, her story changed. She said she couldn't return it because it was past the return window. I was a bit annoyed at first, but still didn't think it was a huge deal. Maybe I could just move on, or maybe she could find a solution. So I kept asking her to return the Dremel. But every couple of months, I would get the same responses. First, "I can't return it anymore, the window closed." Then later, "I don't have the receipt anymore." And then the real kicker, she said she lost it. At this point, I was fuming. For almost 2 years, I had been asking her to either return the Dremel or pay me for it. And now she was telling me that she had lost it? I wasn't buying it. I told her, "You need to replace it, or at least reimburse me for it since I've been asking for years. If you lost it, that's your responsibility." But then, things took a turn. She admitted the truth. She confessed that she didn't lose the Dremel at all. She had taken it, given it to a friend, and then lied to me about it for over 2 years. The entire time, she had been gaslighting me, making excuses, and even accusing me of harassment when I wouldn't drop the issue. She said she couldn't believe I wouldn't just get over it. Her exact words were that it had been years now, and I should just move on. I refused to let it go. I told her that her behavior was not only dishonest but deeply hurtful. She had stolen from me, lied to me, and gaslit me for years. She needed to make it right, either by giving me the Dremel or reimbursing me for its value. But she refused. She flat out refused to make things right. Every year or so, we'd end up arguing about it again. Whenever the topic came up, whether it was through friends or just casual conversation, my sister would act as though I was being completely unreasonable. She would tell me how ridiculous I was being for insisting that she owes me. In her mind, it was absurd that I wouldn't just accept her theft. Then, she made an even bigger declaration. She said that if I couldn't get over it, maybe we shouldn't have a relationship. She actually tried to turn the tables on me and act like I was the one who was being unreasonable for wanting her to take responsibility for stealing from me. She would cry victim, saying I was abusing her by holding her accountable, and that maybe she shouldn't have a relationship with me because of it. This is where I just couldn't hold back anymore. I told her, "Okay, you can cut ties with me if you want, but you're the one who's been an abusive thief. You could just buy me a damn Dremel and make things right, but instead you're trying to play the victim. If you can't do the right thing, then maybe the relationship isn't worth saving. I don't constantly think about this, and I don't hold grudges every day. In fact, we've had a fairly decent relationship as adults. We hang out, talk, and do normal sibling stuff. But around Christmas time, when people bring it up or when she reaches out to me, I always remind her that my position hasn't changed. What she did was wrong, and I'm not going to act like it didn't happen. Even my parents think her behavior is absolutely messed up. They've told her she's wrong, but she always brushes them off or accuses them of taking my side. So, am I the asshole for not letting this go? I've been asking for years for her to make it right, and she refuses. It's not like I'm obsessed with it every day, but I can't just let her get away with stealing from me and acting like she's the one in the right. Am I the asshole for telling off a creepy classmate? Okay, here goes. I, 17F, have been dealing with a creepy classmate, 17M, for all 4 years of high school now. He's autistic, so for a long time, I put up with it because I felt guilty thinking, he doesn't know what he's doing. But over the years, it's just gotten worse and worse. The first year of harassment and stalking was really unsettling. He would make gross comments about my body, pointing out how big my chest was, how thin I was, and things like that. I was really uncomfortable. After that first year, it kind of stopped, but he still followed me around and tried to be my friend in this really awkward, forced way. I just hoped it would eventually stop. Well, it didn't. Each year, he would continue to follow me, sit near me, and just generally make me feel uncomfortable. One time at homecoming, he actually followed me to the bathroom. I had to be escorted out by a huge group of girls, none of whom I even knew, because he wouldn't leave. Felt like he was stalking me at that point, and it honestly scared me. Finally, this year, I started sitting with a big group of my friends at lunch. Guess who tracked me down? Yep, the creepy guy. He followed me to our table, sat down like it was completely normal, and started talking to everyone like he knew them for years. He was really off-putting and just way too comfortable. My friends knew the backstory, so they were creeped out too. They also noticed that I was uncomfortable, and I could see it was affecting them. After that, I decided I had to do something about it. I finally went to a principal and talked about what was going on. The principal talked to him and told him to stop. But surprise, surprise, it didn't work. A few days later, he approached me like nothing happened and sat down again, acting like it was fine. That's when one of my friends, who had had enough, told him off. She told him he was creeping everyone out, and we needed him to leave us alone. Now, he's accusing my friend of being a liar and saying that I'm a horrible person for treating him unfairly. He's upset because I wouldn't just put up with his behavior, and I'm confused. I honestly don't get what I did wrong. Did I do something wrong? Am I the asshole for finally telling him off after years of trying to be patient and avoid conflict? Asterisk asterisk hashtag 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 edit. Thanks for the feedback, everyone. Just to clarify, I've tried being direct with him and telling him to stop. I've also had other friends try to tell him to stop, but nothing changed. I'm someone who struggles with confrontation, and I can't handle it without getting really anxious. I often shake or cry, so I rely on my friends to speak up when I can't. I've tried to report it to teachers, but the excuse I keep hearing is that he's autistic and can't help it. The only teacher who helped was one principal, but after she talked to him, things just went back to normal. My friends and I are now working on reporting him again, and I plan to talk to my mom when I get home to see if she can help me take further action. Thanks for all the support. Am I the asshole for breaking it off with the woman I was seeing because she accused me of trying to kill her dog? First off, apologies in advance for the length. So, I, 29M, have been seeing a woman named Sunny, 28F, for about 5 months. Early on, everything seemed to be going well. I'm not an animal person, but I've always been respectful of other people's pets. I didn't grow up with animals myself because most of my family has allergies or just fears them, so I've never been around them much. I'm just not the type of person who seeks out animals, but I would never harm one, and I make sure I'm polite around them. It's just who I am. Sunny has a dog named Curly, a 2-year-old Labradoodle. She told me she had grown up with dogs but hadn't had one for a while. When she first introduced me to Curly, I didn't expect much, but I also wasn't prepared for how much my allergies would act up. Curly's breed is hypoallergenic, But that didn't seem to matter for me, so I had to adjust my allergy shots to handle being around him. Now the issue started around Thanksgiving. Sunny had to leave town last minute for a business trip and asked me to dog sit for her. She couldn't find anyone else, and she trusted me because, in her words, "You're good with him." I agreed, but I had a condition. I wanted to stay at her place to make sure I wasn't leaving my own stuff exposed, and I figured Curly would be more comfortable in his own space. I didn't explicitly say it, but I didn't want to deal with a hyperactive dog at my own place. Sunny agreed. From the moment I arrived, things were rough. Curly had obviously been upset about Sunny being gone, and when I got there, he had torn up her couch cushions and left a mess. He was barking nonstop, jumping all over me, and generally causing chaos. Sunny suggested that he might be experiencing separation anxiety. I was sympathetic and agreed to work from her place to help ease Curly's anxiety. Over time, I learned his patterns and tried to accommodate him, but it was still difficult. To make matters worse, Sunny missed her Friday flight back, and it wasn't until Saturday that she could return. That reset my plans, and my parents were supposed to fly in that Saturday. I hadn't been to my place since Tuesday, and I still had to clean, grocery shop, and get everything ready for their arrival. Sunny kindly agreed to pick up my parents from the airport so I didn't have to leave Curly for too long. I was grateful for that, though it would be the first time she'd meet my parents. On Saturday morning, I woke up early to take Curly for his walk and found him panting, whimpering, and surrounded by vomit. I panicked and tried calling Sunny, but she didn't pick up. I then called the emergency vet she'd provided. They asked if he had eaten anything unusual, and that's when I realized Curly had gotten into some bags on the table and eaten a bunch of dried fruit, which I later learned contained raisins, something that's toxic to dogs. I rushed him to the vet, genuinely scared for his well-being. I kept trying to call Sunny, but when she finally picked up, she was livid. She immediately accused me of poisoning Curly on purpose. She yelled at me, saying that I did it because I didn't want her to have a dog, and this was my way of getting rid of him. She even used the word prosecuted. No matter how much I apologized and tried to explain it was an accident, she kept screaming at me. She said I was a terrible person and that I shouldn't be allowed near any animals. It was honestly terrifying. Later, when I returned to her place after the vet visit, her cousin was there waiting for me. She had been texting her cousin during the whole situation, and now her cousin told me to leave. As I was packing my things, I was berated about how I should have known better and how I must be a monster if I didn't know what could harm a dog. I didn't argue with her because at that point, I was just done. I texted Sunny, explaining everything that had happened, including the vet's advice. I also told her that it was over between us. I blocked her and deleted her information. Fast forward to yesterday. Sunny showed up at my house, parked in my driveway, and asked to talk. She apologized, saying she had been really scared and reacted out of fear for her dog. She said she didn't think I was a bad person and was genuinely sorry for everything she said. She admitted it was a big overreaction. She also said she was sorry for breaking up with me so suddenly and that she thought we could still have a conversation and see if things could be fixed. She seemed sincere, but I just couldn't get over what had happened. Some of my friends think I should give her another chance. They pointed out that I tend to fall back too easily and then drop things quickly, and they said I should give her some grace because people can act irrationally when scared. They said that people who love their pets can be more sensitive and that I should give her the benefit of the doubt. They even mentioned that I haven't connected with someone like this in years, and I should at least see where it could go. But to be honest, I just feel like a line was crossed. She accused me of trying to harm her dog and used language that made me feel like I could never be trusted again. The whole thing felt like a massive overreaction, and it honestly scared me. I don't know if I can look past that. So, am I the asshole for not giving her another chance? Edit. Thanks for all the comments. Some of you have pointed out how hard it is to get over something like this, and I really appreciate the perspective. After reading everything, I'm feeling more confident in my decision. I just don't think I can go back after how badly things escalated. I know she was scared, but her reaction was completely disproportionate. Am I the asshole for not wanting to go? 35F. haven't talked to my best friend from high school, 35F, in over 5 years. We had been close during high school, but since then we've both lived completely separate lives. We have families now, and although we interact on social media occasionally, we don't talk or meet in person. Recently, she reached out to reconnect, but I've been hesitant. I've made the decision to close that chapter of my life because of some unresolved pain from high school. She was the popular girl, and I was the one who often felt left out or not good enough. There were moments when she'd say one thing to my face, but behind my back, she and her friends would talk about me like I didn't matter. I get it, we were kids, but it still stings. I've moved on and am happy with my life and my current friendships, so I don't really see the need to rekindle anything. The other day, I received a message from her husband, Mark, who I haven't spoken to in years. He said he wanted to buy me a plane ticket to visit Ash, my old friend, for Christmas as a surprise. He was very generous, but honestly, I felt a bit weird about it. He kept insisting and even said he'd cover the cost, but I don't feel comfortable just hopping on a plane after so many years of barely talking. Plus, my family has its own plans for the holidays, and I can't just drop everything for a weekend. I feel anxious about the whole thing and didn't know how to respond, so I told him I'd get back to him, but now I'm just feeling uncomfortable. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but part of me feels like he's treating me like an object to be bought with a plane ticket to make his wife happy. Am I the asshole for not wanting to go? Should I feel honored by the offer? Am I the asshole for telling my sister I can only spend so much on our siblings? I, 25F, have been financially supporting my mom and younger half-siblings, 13F and 14M, for years. My mom works a seasonal job, and due to her partner not helping financially, my sister, 28F, and I have always taken on the responsibility of buying Christmas gifts for the kids. Over the last 10 years, this has become a tradition. Last year alone, I spent $500 to $600 on just my younger siblings, on top of gifts for other people in my life. This has become a big financial strain for me, especially since I live independently and also carry student loan debt. I live about an hour away from my older sister, and though I'm close with my siblings, I am considered the isolated one. I've always been somewhat of a loner, especially with my mental health struggles. I have severe trauma and anxiety related to my family, which makes visiting difficult for me. Despite this, I've continued to help out with the kids and try to stay involved. I also work 2 jobs, which leaves me with limited time and energy to visit or participate in family events. It's a tough balance to strike, but I do it because I care. However, my family doesn't always understand or respect my need for space, and that has caused tension over the years. This year, my older sister reached out to me to ask if I wanted to contribute to the Christmas gifts for the younger siblings. She and my mom had already done most of the shopping, but they wanted me to help with the remaining gifts. I explained that, due to my tight budget, I could only contribute $100. I've been prioritizing paying off my student loan debt, which has been a significant burden for me, and I've been trying to live more frugally to get a handle on my finances. However, my sister's response took me by surprise. She was passive-aggressive and said, "You better not be buying your boyfriend something over $100 then." I was really taken aback by this. I thought it was unfair and rude of her to assume that I would prioritize spending on my boyfriend instead of my siblings. It felt like she was trying to guilt-trip me into spending more, and it made me defensive. I explained to her that I'm just sticking to a budget and that the concert tickets I buy earlier in the year are not an indication that I'm financially irresponsible, but just part of how I manage my leisure activities on a budget. The conversation quickly escalated when she accused me of not prioritizing family. She insisted that family should always come before friends or boyfriends, and that it would be silly of me not to prioritize them. This guilt trip was particularly frustrating because I'm already financially stretched thin, and it felt like she was minimizing my own struggles. I told her I was not coming down for Christmas this year, which was something I had been considering for a while but hadn't had the courage to say. I felt pushed to the breaking point, and in the heat of the moment, I also told my mom that I would be sending my contribution directly to the kids but wouldn't be part of the family gathering. Looking back, I'm questioning whether I handled the situation in the best way. I feel like my decision to withdraw was impulsive and driven by the frustration I felt in that moment. I've been wanting to take a step back from the family dynamic for years but never had the courage to voice it, and this argument kind of pushed me into a corner. I was just trying to set a boundary, but I'm not sure if I could have communicated it in a better way. Could I have found a different way to say no? Or should I have just stuck to my guns? So, am I the asshole for telling my sister that I can only spend so much on Christmas gifts and opting out of the family gathering this year? Could I have handled the situation differently? Am I the asshole for not getting my mom the gift she wanted? So, I graduated college a few months ago, but my graduation ceremony isn't until a month from now. For context, in our family, it's a tradition that the graduation gift is always gold, and my mom had been talking for months about getting me a gift to mark the occasion. Here's where it starts getting tricky. About halfway through those 6 months, my mom gave me a jewelry set while we were cleaning out her closet. She said, "Consider this your graduation gift from me." It was a nice gesture and it was a pretty set, but honestly, I didn't feel like it was a personal gift. It felt like something she had lying around. Still, I didn't make a fuss about it. She had promised that my dad and her would buy me something more substantial later. Flash forward to her birthday 3 weeks ago. I ask her what she wants, and she immediately says she wants the same necklace my aunt had gifted me for my graduation. I was a bit taken aback because, well, she had never mentioned it before and I thought she'd have a different idea in mind. But whatever, I agreed to find it for her. I'm the eldest daughter and, like many families, I'm the one who ends up organizing things, especially since my parents are both not exactly the most gift-giving types. Then, just a week before her birthday, my dad announces we'll be going away for a few days to an Airbnb cabin. The trip was planned around her birthday, and we would be leaving the day before. So now I'm in a time crunch to find this necklace she wanted, and I realize I'm running out of time. I rush to a couple of stores, but none had the exact necklace she asked for. The one store I knew had it, where I originally bought my necklace, wasn't one I could get to in time. So, I ended up going to a different store where I could at least get something that looked nice. I picked out the best thing they had, which was a small diamond necklace. Not gold, but it was still something decent. Here's the thing, my dad paid for it. I'm an unpaid intern and can't afford gifts like that on my own. And my mom always tells me not to worry about the price anyway. So, technically, it was a family gift, not just from me. When I gave it to her, I could tell she wasn't thrilled. It was smaller than she wanted, and I could see her disappointment. She asked, "What happened to the necklace I wanted?" And, in the moment, I lied and said it was sold out. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I was embarrassed, or maybe because I didn't want to deal with the fallout of not getting exactly what she asked for. 3 weeks later, I'm floored when she gives the necklace I bought her back to me, saying, "Consider this your graduation gift from your dad." I was confused. She goes on to explain that she had actually bought the necklace she wanted herself and that it was what my dad had picked out for me instead. She just framed it like it was part of the whole family gift. Now I'm feeling guilty because she obviously didn't love the necklace I bought her, and I still feel bad about lying about the one she really wanted. But the thing is, I didn't have time to get it for her, and even when I did try, the one I got her was the best I could do under the circumstances. Am I the asshole for not getting her the gift she wanted, for lying about it, and for not really having any say in how the gift situation unfolded? I just wanted to get her something nice, and now it feels like everything backfired. Am I the asshole for telling the guidance counselor my classmate called me a slur? I, 17F, am in a music class with 2 sophomore girls, Addison, 15F, and Hazel, 15F. Addison is an absolute sweetheart. She's kind, creative, and someone I get along with really well. Hazel, on the other hand, is more of the preppy type. She's very popular in her grade and honestly has a bit of an attitude. For some context, I'm bisexual and I've been out for about 4 years now. Addison is also on the queer spectrum, but Hazel is straight. I've had a pretty good relationship with both of them, but it's safe to say that my relationship with Hazel isn't exactly the best right now. So, yesterday in class, we were engaging in some lighthearted banter, just joking around as usual. I was teasing them about being shorter than me, and they were making fun of my age, calling me old. Eventually, Hazel threw a playful jab, calling me a dinosaur. Without thinking much of it, I shot back with, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you from all the way down there, laughing. That's when things took a sudden, ugly turn. Hazel immediately snapped, well, at least I'm not a fucking F asterisk got. With no hesitation whatsoever. I was completely stunned. And honestly, it took me a moment to process what had just happened. I stopped talking to her right then and there. After class, I decided to speak to Hazel privately. I pulled her aside in the hallway and said, hey, I understand some people might be okay with being called that, but I personally have bad history with it. Please don't call me that again. I remember every word of that conversation because I had been mentally rehearsing it all class. Her response? Oh, well, it's okay. I have the pass. Couldn't even believe my ears. I raised an eyebrow and asked, okay, who gave you the pass? She casually replied, my best friend. I then told her, yeah, but I didn't. Please just don't call me that. At that point, she rolled her eyes and walked off, clearly not caring much about the whole exchange. I wasn't planning on making a big deal out of it. To be honest, I've heard worse things being said to me in the past, especially growing up in the South. But things took a turn after school. Addison texted me with a screenshot of a message from Hazel. It was a long rant from Hazel about the whole incident. Here's the exact message she sent. This one girl got mad at me for saying F asterisk got and said not to say it, and I said nobody getting affected cause of it, and she said me, and I said I got the pass, so what? It's just a word, and she who gave you the pass, and I said that my best friend, and she said I'm not IR best friend. Oh, I could have said SM stuff, but I shut YP folded hands, light skin tone folded hands, light skin tone folded hands, light skin tone bow to piss me off Ion like her no ways to hell ID like her the day it'd be a cold snowy day in hell. I was absolutely furious after reading that. I couldn't believe she was trivializing it like that. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went through Hazel's Instagram and Snapchat stories and gathered screenshots of offensive comments she had made about gay people and people of color. I then emailed all of it to the school's guidance counselor, hoping that the situation would be taken seriously. The next day at school, Hazel was furious. Apparently, she had to sit out during practice and got detention because of what I'd done. She confronted me, and I told her, I don't care. You brought this on yourself by talking shit. Now, Hazel's mad at me and I'm honestly just fed up. But some of my other friends are telling me that maybe I overreacted, that I should have just let it go and handled it more privately. So, now I'm left wondering, am I the asshole for telling the guidance counselor about what happened? Or was I justified in taking action against Hazel for using a slur and continuously disrespecting me? Am I the asshole for telling my daughter's father that I will not be doing a quinceañera for her? So here's my situation. I, 35F, have a 13-year-old daughter who wants a quinceañera. For those who don't know, it's a huge, traditional celebration when a girl turns 15 in the Hispanic culture. It's typically a big, expensive event with fancy dresses, food, music, and a lot of guests. I'm not against the tradition itself, but I just don't feel comfortable spending that much money on one event. I'm a US-born Hispanic woman, but I'm not exactly steeped in traditional Mexican culture. I've lived in the US most of my life, and my kids are Americanized. They are familiar with the culture, but they're not raised with the kind of traditional Hispanic celebrations that many families have. Here's where the tension starts. My daughter's father, 36M, lives with his mom, doesn't pay child support because of his own financial issues. He owes the IRS and has credit card debt, and doesn't contribute financially to anything for our daughter. I'm the one who pays for everything, her school activities, sports, clothes, trips, you name it. I don't ask him for anything because he's already paying child support for another child he has with his ex, and I don't want to burden him further. I'm in a good place financially. My fiancé and I make a decent income, we're debt-free, and I've worked hard to stay that way. I have a full-time job, side contract work, and I'm a part-time graduate student. I'm managing everything without relying on my ex, and while it's tough, I'm doing it. So when my ex approached me about the quinceañera, he told me that our daughter wants one and that she wants a big party with all the family in one place. I told him right off the bat that I'm not doing a full quinceañera. I offered to throw a simple party in our backyard instead, and I invited him to come. We have a nice house and a spacious backyard, so it would be a fun and affordable way to celebrate her. Then the conversation took a turn. My ex told me that his cousin had a baby shower at a ranch-style venue that cost $3,000 for 250 people. He's now pushing for a similar setup for our daughter's quinceañera. He says his family is huge, at least 100 people, and that it's not fair for our daughter to have a small party when everyone else gets a big one. I freaked out. I don't have the time or energy to plan such a big event, especially since I'm already juggling work, school, and taking care of everything else for our daughter. I told him no, that it wasn't going to be a quinceañera but a simpler party with food, a DJ, and no more than 100 people. He then told me I was really disappointing him, which hit me hard. I explained that I simply couldn't afford it, that quinceañeras are ridiculously expensive, dress, dolls, waltz, damas, band, and all that, and that I couldn't handle the stress of planning a huge event on top of everything else I'm doing. To make matters worse, he gave me $200 recently and said he would give me $100 every pay period going forward. But, to be honest, this is the first time he's given me that much money for our daughter since we separated when she was 1. The money feels like a band-aid, and it doesn't change the fact that he's not been involved in any meaningful way for most of her life. I'm already stressed because I'm facing finals this week, and the stress of dealing with him is keeping me up at night. It feels like I'm constantly walking on eggshells, and no matter what I do, I'm made to feel like I'm in the wrong. Talking to him is pointless because all it does is cause me more anxiety. Now, I'm considering giving him back the money and telling him we should each just do what we can for our daughter separately. I just don't know if that will make things worse, and I'm trying to keep things as civil as possible for the sake of our daughter. Update. I just want to clarify that I was always planning to throw my daughter a party. I wasn't going to go all out with a quinceañera, but I had planned for something nice in our backyard. I told her dad that he's more than welcome to come, but I wasn't going to be spending thousands of dollars on an extravagant event. I just want to be realistic and make sure we do something manageable and meaningful, not something that will put unnecessary stress on me or our finances. Am I the asshole for my reaction to my wife giving our twin sons true crime-related names? My wife has a bit of a peculiar hobby. She's obsessed with true crime. It's one of those interests that I try to ignore as much as possible. For the most part, she's respectful about it and knows when it's time to talk about it and when to keep it to herself. Honestly, it doesn't come up much unless she's around another true crime enthusiast or watching a documentary on the subject. The hobby doesn't interfere too much with our relationship, so I've never been too bothered by it. That being said, we recently had twin boys earlier this year. As you can imagine, choosing names was a big deal for us. There were lots of negotiations between us, especially since I wanted to make sure we chose names that would be timeless and not end up being a source of teasing later on. I also wanted to steer clear of anything too unusual, something that would stand out in a bad way. I'm a bit traditional when it comes to names, so I took on the role of playing the more cautious one in our discussions. Ultimately, I agreed that she had the final say on names, especially since she was doing most of the hard work with the pregnancy and delivery. But I did voice my concerns whenever she suggested names that I felt were too eccentric or life-ruining, as I put it. There was a particular name she suggested that made me raise an eyebrow, but after some serious back and forth, we settled on 2 names that seemed perfectly normal: Dylan and Eric. They're pretty common names, and I thought nothing of them. To me, they were just typical names for our sons. At the time, everything felt fine, and we were both excited to welcome our little ones. That was until we visited my sister-in-law's house a few weeks ago to show off the twins. My wife was beaming with pride as she introduced them, and everything seemed fine until my sister-in-law pulled me aside privately. She looked at me with a mix of concern and surprise and said, "Are you serious? You named your twins after them." I was immediately confused. I had no idea what she meant. At first, I thought she was just being dramatic, but she clarified that our sons' names, Dylan and Eric, were the same as the infamous Columbine shooters, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I had honestly never made that connection until that moment. I was in shock. I immediately tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a coincidence, but the reality of the situation set in. When I got home later that day, I confronted my wife. I told her I was seriously concerned and that we needed to change the names. I explained that the association with the Columbine tragedy was something neither of us had considered, and I didn't want our children to go through life with names that might attract unwanted attention or judgment. She seemed incredibly defensive and insisted that it was purely a coincidence. She said that while she might have subconsciously paired the names together, there was nothing wrong with them, and they were just common names. She argued that changing the names now would be a hassle and might draw even more attention to the situation. I tried to reason with her, saying that we could simply explain that we hadn't made the connection at the time and that we wanted to make things right. After all, my sister-in-law had already noticed it, and I could only imagine what other people might think once they realized the association. But my wife remained firm and wouldn't budge. She seemed genuinely upset that I would suggest changing their names, almost as if I were overreacting. I get that she's attached to the names now, but I feel like we're walking into a minefield with them. The thought of our sons growing up with the same names as such infamous figures feels wrong to me. I even tried suggesting alternatives, but she just dismissed them. She says that it's an overreaction on my part, and that people shouldn't judge our kids based on their names. She doesn't want to give in to the public's perception. But the more I think about it, the more I can't shake the feeling that it's a huge mistake. I'm really stuck. I love my wife, and I know she doesn't mean any harm, but I feel strongly that we need to change the names. Am I wrong for asking her to do so, or am I overreacting? Edit * for context. Some of you might be wondering why the names didn't raise red flags earlier. The truth is, we didn't really think too much about the names when we chose them. Dylan and Eric just felt right to us at the time, and it wasn't until my sister-in-law pointed it out that the connection clicked. It's also worth noting that my wife has a bit of a quirky, rebellious streak, and I think part of her resistance to changing the names has to do with the fact that she doesn't want to be seen as caving into social pressures. I respect that, but I also think we need to be mindful of the long-term impact this could have on our children. Am I the asshole for telling my mom she'll regret picking her husband over her children? I, 23F, recently moved in with my mom to help her with her bills and take care of my 3 younger siblings. My husband, 22M, and I decided to make the move over the summer because my mom had been dating this man, now her husband, on and off for the last 7 to 8 years. I didn't want her to get back with him because, from what I could see, he wasn't good for her, and their relationship had always been unstable. Not long after we moved in, my mom started talking to him again. Despite telling me that she would never get back with him, she went ahead and married him. Since then, she's developed this mentality that she's now his wife, and that means her responsibilities are with him first and foremost. This has meant that we, her children, see her less and less. She doesn't even live with us full-time anymore. Before she remarried, my mom would be around after work, and we'd spend weekends together. But now, she goes straight to her husband after work and only sees my siblings in the mornings when she takes them to school. She isn't even home on weekends. To say my siblings and I are upset would be an understatement. This past weekend, things came to a head. My siblings, who miss their mom, reached out to her and told her they wanted to spend time with her. She responded by calling them and saying that when she was around, they never appreciated her and just played video games all the time. Now, apparently, they suddenly miss her and want to spend time with her. This made my siblings really sad, and I knew I had to step in. I texted my mom, telling her she couldn't seriously be choosing a man over her kids, especially since the kids love her and need her more than just a few minutes in the morning. I told her that just because they have food and a roof over their heads doesn't mean they don't need their mom. I pointed out that she shouldn't be picking a man who has shown time and again that he doesn't care about her over her children who do. Her response was that when she was with us, we didn't appreciate her and we spent too much time on video games. I tried to reason with her and said she was being unfair to my siblings, who are just kids. She got defensive and said, "Oh, so I'm a bad mom? Okay, that's fine. You'll regret your words one day." Then, she hung up on me and refused to answer my calls and texts. She even told my sister that she wasn't going to talk to me anymore. I felt hurt and frustrated, so I sent her a text saying that she would be the one to regret her actions, not me. I told her that one day she'd realize that putting a man above her children wasn't the way to go, and she'd be sorry for it. I also said that it's a mental issue to be so attached to a man to the point of neglecting your own kids, and that I love her, but I know she's not okay in this situation. Since then, she has refused to talk to me and only contacts my siblings. Now, I'm wondering if I went too far. Was it wrong for me to say those things to my mom, or was I just giving her the reality check she needed? Am I the asshole for telling my boyfriend to stop smoking inside after previously allowing him to do so? I, 25 male, have been dating my boyfriend, 27, for over a year, and recently, we decided to move in together. He's been a smoker for years, and when we first met, he smoked in his own apartment. I never really had an issue with it. I figured it was part of who he was, and I didn't want to make him feel like he had to change in his own space. When we were planning to move in together, he asked me if he could continue smoking inside. Since he had done it for so long, I could tell he was pretty set in his ways, and I didn't want to cause tension. Out of love, I agreed to let him keep smoking inside. We also decided on an apartment that didn't have a balcony, thinking it wouldn't be a big deal. This apartment was cheaper and seemed like a good choice since he wouldn't need a balcony for smoking. However, now that we've been living together for a few weeks, I'm starting to regret my decision. It's one thing to visit a smoker's home for a few hours and leave, but living in a smoker household is an entirely different experience. While I've never been bothered by the smell of cigarette smoke when visiting him, I now realize how much it permeates everything when it's a constant presence. My clothes, my furniture, and even things I've had for years now smell like smoke. Before, it was just the clothes I wore when visiting him, and the smell would fade after a few hours or a day. But now, everything in our apartment smells like cigarettes, and I didn't anticipate how uncomfortable it would make me. I love my boyfriend, but I can't deny how much this is starting to bother me. So I brought it up to him. I explained that I would really appreciate it if he could smoke outside or at least by a window. I told him that it's not about the health risks, it's just the smell and how it's affecting everything in our home. He got upset and refused, saying that when we moved in together, I had agreed to let him smoke inside. He said it's unfair to change the rules now after we both agreed on it. I completely understand his frustration. I know I gave him my word, and I never expected to feel so strongly about this issue. But now, it's becoming a problem for me, and I'm not sure how to handle it without causing tension between us. I don't want this to be something that drives a wedge between us, but I also don't want to live in an apartment that constantly smells like cigarettes. So, am I the asshole for asking him to smoke outside after previously agreeing to let him smoke inside? Am I the asshole for not letting my kids visit their grandparents? Hello, everyone. I've been in a tough spot for a while and I'm looking for some perspective. I posted a couple of months ago about my ex's wife staging a religious intervention when my son, Ben, decided he wanted to embrace Judaism and be bar mitzvahed. For context, we share 3 kids: Amy, 18, Tom, 16, and Ben, 15. Some of you helped me realize I was underreacting, so I consulted a lawyer, and I now have full decision-making for my kids' religious upbringing and full custody. My ex has visitation every other weekend, but I've been flexible about letting him have the kids whenever he wants. However, I made one rule. My ex's wife, the stepmother, is never around them. My kids are very close with their paternal grandparents, and they know the stepmother isn't allowed to be present. Twice, when I picked the kids up from their grandparents, the stepmother was there. The excuse was that she had just popped in briefly to drop off the baby, but I made it clear that if she was there, I'd plan a different day for them to visit. They insisted it was just a last-minute visit, and I let it go. Now, they want the kids to visit for 5 days over Christmas break, not on the 24th or 25th, and I'm not comfortable with the stepmother being around. Ben still gets very anxious around her, and he's in therapy for it. The problem is that my in-laws refuse to tell her she can't come over. They claim they don't want to get in the middle, and that it's making them choose between their grandkids and their daughter-in-law. I reached out to my ex about it and he brushed me off. He said since the stepmother wouldn't be around for long, he wasn't stopping it. He also claimed there's nothing in the custody order that says she can't be present and that as his wife and the mother of their child, she shouldn't have to tiptoe around. I was so frustrated that I lost it. I told him I'd be going back to court for supervised visits and a restraining order against her if she kept showing up around the kids. He hung up on me. I then asked the kids what they wanted. Amy said their grandparents. Told them not to say anything to avoid upsetting me. Ben was clearly relieved, and it broke my heart. Tom said he'd stay with Ben. I called my ex-mother-in-law and told her the kids wouldn't be coming for the visit unless they chose to stop letting the stepmother around. I also said they were welcome to visit the kids at our house, but I wouldn't be letting the kids go to theirs unless she was kept away. I told them it was wrong to ask the kids to keep secrets. They called my ex, who berated me for punishing his parents. The stepmother then sent me a text saying I was being unfair. Now, my ex and his family are all upset with me, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm being unreasonable. Everyone seems to think I'm the asshole for keeping the kids from seeing their grandparents. So, am I wrong for not letting my kids visit their grandparents when the stepmother will be there? Edit asterisk to clarify, I have no issue with the kids seeing their grandparents. My issue is with the stepmother being present when it's clear that Ben, especially, is still struggling with her presence. It's not just about religious differences. It's also about the emotional impact it's having on him. The secrecy and pressure to choose between his grandparents and his own well-being is what I can't accept. I've been patient and understanding in the past, but I can't keep ignoring how Ben feels. Am I the asshole for refusing to let my mentally ill hoarder in-laws stay at my house indefinitely? I, 37, male, and my wife, 36, both work from home. We've been married for 14 years, and while we've been through a lot together, one thing that has been a constant issue is my in-laws. My in-laws are in their 60s and are hoarders. They're not elderly but have a long history of neglecting themselves, their house, and even their pets. They don't clean, cook, or take care of their hygiene. Their house smells of urine, and their cats urinate and defecate everywhere. Their doctors have even made passive comments about the smell of their home, but they refuse help or to even consider a nursing home. Incident 1. Winter of 2023. Last winter, my father-in-law, Phil, who weighs over 350 pounds, fell at their house. My in-laws couldn't get him up, so they had to call the fire department. The fire department was horrified by the state of their home and called the health department. They gave my in-laws about 14 days to fix some of the issues around the house, including the smell, hygiene, and trash accumulation. The Humane Society came and took their 2 cats away because of the filthy living conditions. They did just enough to pass inspection, but within weeks, everything went back to the way it was. Their house has mold, cat feces, rot, and who knows what else. My Phil has recently recovered from cancer, but his leg infections have been coming back, probably because of the unsanitary environment. I've never been to their home because I can't stomach the thought of it, and my wife has only gone a few times under duress. Incident 2. Today, my Phil fell again, and the fire department had to be called again. His leg infections have gotten so bad that maggots were growing in them. He was delirious from the fall and is now being admitted to the hospital for a kidney injury or something. My MIL is back at the house, but she doesn't have a cell phone, and it seems like she can't get back into the house right now due to the health department marking it as unsafe. My wife is on her way to pick up my MIL and bring her back to our house. However, I said no. I told her, I don't want my MIL staying here indefinitely. I understand that my wife feels the need to help, but I've been very clear about how I feel about the situation. My in-laws had a year to improve their living conditions after the fire department's warning, and they didn't. Now I'm being asked to shelter my MIL, whose behavior has enabled my FIL's hoarding and neglectful lifestyle. We have the room, yes, but my wife suggested that she would sleep in the guest bedroom, which is also my office. That's where I draw the line. I've been clear that I'm not comfortable having her live here, especially after everything we've been through. I feel like my feelings should be respected, too, and that we should come to an agreement as a couple about how we deal with these situations. So, am I the asshole for refusing to let my MIL stay here? My wife seems to think I'm being unreasonable, and everyone else seems to think I'm being harsh. But, at this point, I feel like I've done my part by supporting her emotionally through all of this, and I don't want to become the safety net for their choices anymore. Edit for some context. This isn't just about a temporary stay. My wife was already talking about her mom staying here until her dad recovers. No clear timeline on that, and possibly even longer. I'm just not willing to have that become a long-term solution. I've tried to have conversations with my in-laws about their living situation before, but it never changes. My wife believes her mom is a victim of the situation, but I think enabling them is just prolonging the inevitable. I want to be there for my wife, but I also think that this can't just fall on me. I feel like my wife is choosing to avoid the reality of the situation, and it's making me frustrated. Am I the asshole for not including the entire family in a quilt I made for my mother? So, a while ago, I, 25F, decided to make my mom a quilt for her birthday. I'm into sewing, and I thought it would be a meaningful and personal gift. My idea was to incorporate some family photos into the quilt, so I had photos of my parents, me, and my siblings printed onto fabric squares and sewed them into the quilt. When I gave it to my mom, she seemed initially happy with it, but then I noticed her face drop when she looked at the photos. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me she was upset that I didn't include any photos of the dog. Yes, the dog. Now, let me explain. I have a major phobia of dogs. I've had it for as long as I can remember, and while I understand it may sound irrational, it's just something I've never been able to overcome. My mom, however, treats the dog like it's a member of the family. She calls it her youngest son, and has framed photos of the dog all over the house. Literally more photos of the dog than of her own children. She even cooks meals for the dog and gets it gifts at Christmas. It's just a lot. I didn't include the dog in the quilt because of my phobia, and also because, honestly, I felt like there were already so many photos of the dog around the house, and I wanted to give her something that would remind her of her human family. The quilt had pictures of my siblings and me when we were kids, before they even got the dog, and I thought that would be a nice touch. However, when my mom saw that the dog wasn't in the quilt, she was visibly disappointed. She said it was cruel of me not to include her youngest son, and it really hurt. I tried to explain my reasons, but she just sighed and said it felt like I didn't care about the dog, which isn't true at all. I've never harmed the dog or wished it harm, and I don't want anyone to think that. I just don't want to be around it because of my fear. Since then, my mom has barely acknowledged the quilt. She didn't use it or even mention it again. I later found it under her bed, untouched. I feel really guilty, especially since I was trying to make her something special before I move away. My dad told me it was fine that I didn't include the dog, but my brother thinks I made a huge mistake. It's been a week, and now the quilt is gone. I found it in the trash, slightly hidden under some other garbage. I tried cleaning it up, but now I'm at a loss for what to do with it. I feel so hurt and confused. I just wanted to make my mom happy, but now I'm wondering if I was wrong. I've read some comments where people are upset that I deliberately left out the dog to hurt my mom, and I just want to clarify that wasn't my intention at all. I wasn't trying to be cruel, and I understand that the dog is important to her. It's just that, for me, the dog has always been a source of stress, especially with my phobia. I didn't want to bring the dog into something meant to celebrate our family. I also want to clarify that my mother values the dog over her children at times. She said multiple times that if there were a fire in the house, she would save the dog first before her children. It's a bit of a difficult dynamic, but it's been that way for years. I also want to point out that my mom's actions, encouraging the dog to chase me or bark at me, despite my clear fear, have really impacted me over the years. It's not just a neutral situation. It's something that's been hard for me to deal with. After I wrote this post, I went to check the trash bin outside because I couldn't find the quilt anywhere. Sure enough, it was there, slightly hidden under some other garbage. I pulled it out and tried to clean it up, but I'm not sure what to do now. I'm genuinely hurt and confused, and I feel like maybe I've caused irreparable damage to my relationship with my mom. So, am I the asshole for not including the dog in the quilt? Should I have been more considerate about my mom's feelings, or is she overreacting to my decision? My sister has always had a soft heart, soft as sweetbread. She cried after the old woman, despite everything. Maybe because of everything. I remember holding her as she wept, both of us covered in soot, her fingers scalded from holding shut the oven door. After the tears, she was quiet. She trailed me through the awful house with its sweetbread walls and sugared windows. I found the clothes we'd arrived in, offered up her kirtle, and she donned it without a word. She showed no whisper of response when we found the treasure in the attic, only nodded vaguely when I asked her to help me fill up the few bags we could easily carry back through the woods. Maybe it would be enough. Enough to keep us safe from our stepmother's whims. I do not want to go back there. It was the first she'd spoken in hours. I hesitated outside the witch's cottage, looking back over my shoulder at her. I do not want to go back to them. I sighed. Nor do I. But where else can we go? She wrung her fingers together in front of her skirt, eyes downcast and her teeth digging into her lower lip. Eventually, though, she nodded. Fine. You are right. She looked back at the house. Wait 1 minute. There may be something left in the kitchen. The kitchen, I repeated in horror, but she only nodded. Yes, she did not think I paid attention, but I did. I know which of her potions might be useful if nothing else. We can sell them when we get back. I nodded slowly and followed her back into the cottage, though I stopped in the open arch that led into the kitchen itself. She moved easily through the space, reminding me painfully of just how long she had been under the witch's thumb while the horrid crone tried to fatten me like a prize hog. She collected some dozen bottles and vials, tucking them carefully in between the bolts of silks and satins we had pilfered from the attic before returning to me. Let us go. Though there was no trail this time, she seemed to know her way through the trees. I asked how once when we paused to wait out the dark, but all she said was that she simply knew now, as though the forest spoke to her. In a way it hadn't before. I felt the first thrill of fear at that, but I knew that she was still so scared herself. I refused to let her see it. I tried to coax her into dreaming about what sort of life we might have with the witch's pilfered treasure, and managed to earn a wan smile for my efforts. But it was cold and dark, and soon enough we simply huddled together under a gnarled tree as we waited for the deepest part of night to pass. When grayish dawnlight began to filter through the leaves, she was the first to stand. She had gone quiet again, and only answered me with faint hums or single words as we continued on our way. She seemed more comfortable to be leading us now, but something in the set of her shoulders reminded me of something. Something I could not quite name. Eventually, I lapsed into her silence. When the trees broke apart to reveal the familiar shape of our father's home, she froze. Then she broke into a run, and I was only half a step behind her. The door was already opening when we reached the stoop, and our father met us with his arms open and tears in his eyes. He held us close and apologized, over and over, praising the Lord's name. I embraced him in turn, but alongside the relief in my chest there was an anger in my gut. It had started a spark, but over the length of our trek back through the woods had grown into a steady flame. I met my sister's eyes over our father's shoulder, and a chill ran through me. If my anger was a flame, then hers was the dead cold of darkest winter. Our father explained that our stepmother had been stricken ill, not long after we left. She was in her room now, asleep, and had been for days. He did not expect her to recover, though he had been following the physician's orders as best he could. "Perhaps she shall rally to see you," he offered us hopefully. When neither of us answered, he sighed and dragged a hand down his thick beard. There was more gray in it than I remembered. "I know you must be angry with me, with us," he told us wretchedly, "that I could lose track of you so easily. It is an unforgivable failing in a father." "Lost?" I started slightly at the sharp edge in my sister's voice. Our father did too. She had always had a soft voice to match her heart. "We were lost?" she repeated. Staring at him intently, our father stared back, eyes wide with a hint of fear. "Lost?" he confirmed at last in little more than a whisper. I dropped my eyes, unable to continue looking at him. My sister did not. Abruptly, she stood from our small table. "We will go see her, then?" I blinked, startled both by the sudden movement and the conviction in her voice, but I followed her into our stepmother's sick room. That flame of rage flickered a little higher in my chest, and I found that I could not make myself move more than 2 steps inside the door. My sister knelt beside the hateful woman, and smoothed a hand over her brow in a gesture so tender it made me want to break something. "Here." She tipped one of the witch's vials against her lips. "This will help." I almost reached out to stop her, but as though she sensed the movement, she held a staying hand back toward me. When the vial was empty, she stood and brushed her hands down the front of her skirt. She did not look at me as she left the room. I hesitated a moment longer behind her, staring at the woman who had left us to the wood and the wild. Already her breathing seemed easier. Anger and love for my sister Ward, twin flames in the center of my chest. She had always borne such a soft heart. Our stepmother was awake and lively within a day. Though shocked by our return, she was mollified enough by the offerings of treasure we had stolen away with that she simpered and even summoned up some mawkish tears through which to tell us she was so sorry we had been lost to the wood. My rage burned hotter, and my sister grew colder. "We should celebrate your return," our stepmother exclaimed, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders but no other sign of her illness remaining. "What do you wish for supper, my darlings?" "Sweetbread." I jerked around to stare at my sister, eyes wide and mouth agape. She did not so much as glance at me, but I felt her hand take mine under the table. She smiled at our stepmother, and my throat went dry. "But you are still recovering, stepmother." "I feel quite well, all things considered." "I shall make it," she offered gently. I could have stopped her then, could have clutched her hand in mine and dragged us out. We could have taken the treasure and left. It had been foolish of me to think there was nowhere for us to go. We might go anywhere. Seeing our father again, hearing him refuse to admit what they had done, made me sure of that. But my sister looked at me, just for a moment, and the ice in her gaze froze me to my chair. She was not looking for permission, but I nodded shakily anyway. Our stepmother exclaimed what a good, kind girl she was as she moved into the kitchen. Soon enough, the cloying smell of the baking sweetbread hung thick in the air. It was all I could do not to gag. My sister served the plates while the bread was still steaming gently, even drizzling the last of our honey stores over our parents' portions. "We can always get more at the market now," she said with a hollow little laugh. Our stepmother agreed happily, though our father hesitated a moment before doing so himself. He was watching my sister with a faint wariness as she took her seat beside me. "Go on, then, let us eat." They did. We sat in silence. Took our stepmother first. A faint cough, a furrow in her brow. She looked up with confusion, which changed quickly to a horrified realization as she stared at my sister. "You!" Our father choked, red spattering his lips. I looked away, squeezing my sister's hand tight where she had once more taken it beneath the table. We were desperate," he strangled out, reaching for her pleadingly. "I did not want to. She made me." My sister shook her head. "You let her." He collapsed forward onto the table, his breath a wheezing rattle that grew fainter with each passing moment. Our stepmother tried to lunge for us, but her legs gave out and she sprawled across the floor. A scarlet trail, like candied jam, trickled from the corner of her mouth. "You?" she gasped again, glaring balefully up at my sister. "You, little witch." They both began to convulse. I buried my face in my sister's shoulder. I could feel her stroking my hair even without raising my head. I knew she did not look away until their last breaths had faded into silence. Then she simply stood, her hands still in mine. We were both silent as we gathered up our bags still unpacked by the front door and stepped out into the cool evening. "You are afraid." I swallowed. "Why, yes." She smiled at me, squeezed my hand again, and all I felt was cold. "You do not need to be. I will protect you." My sister has always had a soft heart, soft as poisoned sweetbread. The town of Willoughby slept under a blanket of twilight, its streets quiet but for the occasional chime of an unseen clock tower. It was a place caught in a perpetual dusk, where shadows stretched long and the air carried the faint scent of old books and candle wax. Through these shadowed streets walked a man named William Crow, his shoes worn thin and his purpose as faded as the name on the satchel he carried. William had arrived on a train he couldn't remember boarding. He had been searching, always searching, but the destination was unclear, even to himself. There was a feeling in his chest, like a clock wound too tightly, ticking down to something unnamed. The town of Twilight Willoughby was strange, as towns go. The buildings seemed older than they should have been, leaning slightly as if listening to secrets whispered by the wind. The people who wandered the streets, shopkeepers, schoolchildren, and men in wide-brimmed hats, moved with the unhurried grace of those who had no particular place to be. William stopped outside a shop with a wooden sign that read, "Clocks repaired. Time lost, time found." The ticking inside was rhythmic, hypnotic. He pushed open the door, a bell jingling softly above him. The clockmaker behind the counter stood an old man with wiry hair and spectacles that seemed to catch the glow of the dim gaslight. He was tinkering with a pocket watch, a magnifying lens perched on one eye. "Lost something, have you?" the man asked without looking up. "Excuse me," William replied. The clockmaker finally raised his gaze, his eyes the color of tarnished brass. "You're lost. That's why you're here. Everyone who walks through my door is." I don't think I am," William stammered. "I was just passing by." "Nobody passes by Willoughby," the clockmaker interrupted. He set down the watch, folded his hands, and leaned forward. "Tell me, Mr. Crow, what are you looking for?" William's heart skipped. "How do you know my name?" The clockmaker smiled faintly. "I know a great many things. I know you've been searching for something or someone for years. I know you feel like time has slipped through your fingers, like sand from a broken hourglass. Am I wrong?" William hesitated. "No," he admitted. "But how?" "Willoughby isn't just a place, Mr. Crow. It's a crossroads. People like you come here when they've lost their way, when they've forgotten what it is they're searching for. And sometimes, if they're ready, They find it. The clockmaker reached beneath the counter and produced a small, ornate pocket watch. Its surface was engraved with swirling constellations and the faint outline of an hourglass. He held it out. "This is yours," the clockmaker said. "I've never seen that before," William replied, but his hand moved to take it. The moment his fingers brushed the metal, he felt a jolt, a memory, sharp and vivid. The forgotten memory he was sitting on a park bench years ago. A boy with curly hair sat beside him, clutching a wooden toy plane. His son. His son. They were laughing, sharing a moment beneath a sunlit sky. But the scene shifted. William was walking away, briefcase in hand, while the boy's voice called after him, distant and plaintive. "Dad, you forgot." And then the memory faded. William gasped, the watch trembling in his hands. "What is this? What did you do to me?" The clockmaker regarded him solemnly. "You've forgotten what matters most, Mr. Crow. Time has a way of blurring things, doesn't it? But this watch, it can help you. It can take you back, if you're willing." "Take me back," William whispered. His heart pounded, a mixture of hope and fear. "To where?" "To him." The clockmaker nodded. "But be warned, it's not without cost. To regain what you've lost, you must let go of what you've become." The choice. William stared at the watch. He could feel the weight of years pressing down on him, all the choices that had brought him to this lonely crossroads. He thought of his son's face, now a blur in his memory, and the ache of an unspoken promise. "What happens if I don't?" he asked quietly. The clockmaker tilted his head. "Then you continue as you are, a wanderer in the twilight, chasing ghosts that never were. The choice is yours." William closed his eyes. The ticking of the clocks seemed to grow louder, filling the shop with a relentless rhythm. He felt the pull of regret, the weight of time wasted, and then something lighter, hope. The turning of the key. William opened the watch. Inside, the hands were still. He turned the small key, winding it carefully. As the hands began to move, the world around him dissolved into golden light, the shop, the clockmaker, and the town of Willoughby fading into the glow. The gift of time. The golden light enveloped William as the world dissolved, the ticking of the watch blending with the pounding of his heart. He felt weightless, suspended in a river of light and shadow, as memories long buried surfaced like fragile blossoms. Laughter, sunlight, the warmth of small hands clutching his own. It all came rushing back. And then, as suddenly as it began, the light receded. William found himself in a room, dimly lit, its walls lined with clocks of every shape and size. Unlike the clockmaker's shop, these clocks didn't tick in unison. Each seemed to chime to its own rhythm, creating a symphony of time itself. At the center of the room stood the clockmaker, but he was different now, taller, younger, and radiating an ethereal glow. "This is the in-between," the clockmaker explained, his voice resonating like a bell. "Time's threshold. Here, the threads of your life converge. Before you step forward, you must confront what you've left behind." Before William could reply, the air shimmered, and a figure stepped into view. His son, older now, with eyes so familiar they made William's chest tighten. The boy, no, the young man, regarded him, with a mix of longing and sadness. "Dad," he said softly, "you've been gone so long." "Why?" "I was lost," William whispered, tears blurring his vision. "Lost in work, in regret, in everything but you." His son smiled faintly. "It's not too late, but you must let go of the past to truly come back." The clockmaker handed William a small key, different from the one that wound the watch. "This key will unlock the path you choose, William. But only one door can open." William turned toward two doors that had materialized. A weathered one marked regret and another, bright and inviting, marked hope. His hand trembled as he reached for the keyhole. As the door swung open, light poured through, warm and forgiving. On the other side, his son's laughter echoed, vibrant and full of life. Epilogue: in a park bathed in sunlight, a man sat on a bench, watching a boy with curly hair fly a wooden plane. The man smiled, tears glistening in his eyes as the boy ran to him. "Dad," the boy said breathlessly, holding out the plane. "You forgot this." William Crow took the plane, his hands steady, his heart full. "I won't forget. Again," he promised. And somewhere, in a place caught between moments, the clockmaker smiled. Am I the asshole for not including an ex-bridesmaid in wedding events? I, 28F, am getting married soon, and recently, one of my bridesmaids decided to step down because she didn't like the dresses I chose for the wedding. We had a polite discussion about it, and I completely understood her decision. It's a voluntary role, and I didn't want to force her to stay in the bridal party if she wasn't comfortable with it. The issue is that, since she's no longer in the bridal party, I've removed her from the bridesmaid group chat, and she won't be invited to the bachelorette dinner, the rehearsal dinner, or any of the bridal party events like getting ready with the bridesmaids the day of or sitting at the head table. To me, this makes sense. It's for the bridal party and close family, and she is neither. However, she feels that because she's been my close friend for years, she should still be included in these events. She thinks that by excluding her, I'm being vindictive. She says she should still be invited to everything she was originally part of. I don't think I'm wrong because, in my view, it's not about her being a good friend. She's no longer part of the wedding party. But now I'm second-guessing myself. ITA for not inviting her to these events after she stepped down? Edit asterisk I've seen some comments suggesting I should invite other friends to the bachelorette or other events. I get that different social groups do things differently, but based on my past experiences as a bridesmaid, I've always attended bachelorette parties with only the bridal party. That's what I planned for this one too. I'm not planning to change it now, as I have a large bridal party already, and inviting anyone else would make it harder to manage logistics and expenses. The fluttering, chirping noise of bats wake me from my slumber. As my eyes slowly open, I turn off my alarm and think, maybe this is the day. With creaking bones, I get out of the bed. Yes, a bed, not a coffin. I may be old, but being conservative and being a masochist are two completely different things. I mean, what kind of madman ever thought that we should consider exchanging cushy pillows for an airless, stinky wooden box? I draw the curtains and take a peek. It's dark outside, but in the distance, I can see a dying arrow of the sun, slowly ducking behind some hill of nowhere. This sight tends to stay with me throughout the day, a grim reminder of the fact that even in eternity, things always remain in motion. I light a candle and let its trembling light guide me downstairs. I could of course use a phone as well, but that would be way less cool. I prefer certain things to be like they were in the old days, with the exception of the coffin for bed exchange, of course. I step over the bodies of my fellow kind, lying around. There are just so many of them, I can't even count. One might say I am kind enough to let them in, while others may argue I was forced to do so. Doesn't matter, they're here now. I just wonder when one will stumble upon that little hidden door behind the bookcase. I take a glance, but it seems like no one has noticed yet. I can't just stand around, I got to go. I step outside on the streets, and as always, the smell of rotting, burning flesh fills the back of my throat. The poor devils who are not fortunate enough to take shelter are still recovering from the burns the sun endured. Shaking from the pain and hunger, they curl up and look within. I can't imagine what they could find there, other than despair. I walk past them as I always do. It's funny how you can get used to the worst possible versions of reality. The upside is that there is not much lower form of existence, at least not that I could imagine. This sight frustrates me more than it usually does. I sometimes remember the days when we were powerful, mighty creatures, full of mystery and elegance. And now I am going to the freaking dentist. It's no joke. These canine teeth are ridiculously large, and at some point in time, they've begun pressing on the normal ones, as if they were trying to squeeze out even that tiny resemblance of humanity I once had. It's painful, and not just from a spiritual, sentimental perspective. It truly hurts every time I chew. Luckily, the dentist is almost as old as me. He has been pulling teeth since the 12th century, so he has some experience. Although I recently learned that he started out as an enthusiastic amateur, doing that for fun, and only studied the actual art behind his craft a few hundred years ago. Some may call him sadist, but I'd like to think that he is just a natural. My concern is a bit simpler. I know one too many vampires with dentures. Sure, you get to choose the size and color, but I feel like that's a stigma that's kind of hard to wash away. With that in mind, I'd really be happy to keep everything I have at the place where they are currently located. I end up being fortunate enough for him to see me off with a few strokes at my jaw. The pain that follows is strong enough to overcome anything I felt before I was foolish enough to decide that paying him a visit is a good idea. Told you he is good. On my way back home, I take a little detour to the market. Seeing the town square, memories suddenly rush at me again. I remember running through the woods, chasing down humans to draw their delicious, warm, fresh, nutritious blood. The taste is still on my lips. I remember their horror, the fear, and my disgust. The disgust towards them, towards myself, and the never-ending hunger for more, the hunger that does not sleep and which can never fully be satisfied. I remember their bodies running dry, bloodless, gray skins, and the groans as they turn into a monster. Like me. The more you drink, the stronger you become. The more you drink, the less food that there is to come. That's a harsh lesson we have all learned. It began with the Lord imposing restrictions. 1 human per day for each vampire. Even that wasn't enough, so it soon became a human a week, then a human a month. And now, vampires are lucky if they get their hands on any humans at all. Of course, there were those who didn't obey, who said, to hell with it, what could they do? It's true, we cannot be killed, but that doesn't mean we cannot be disposed of. Most who defy the Lord are shred to a billion pieces and then scattered in the seas. I can't imagine how, but it is said that even then, their consciousness remains. The pain is constant and immeasurable, but they cannot die. I've known those who tried to take their own lives and ended up that way. That's a state that's hard to come back from, although it's not without precedent either. I guess that's also the state I'll end up in eventually, should anyone find that little bookshelf of mine. Then there were those who thought they should give it a try with animals. Dogs, wolves, bears, foxes, sheep. Their blood was far from being as good as humans, but at least they were something. On the other hand, once turned, they became vicious, immortal monsters incapable of any self-control. Handling them has become one of our top priorities. I mean, what can you do with creatures who cannot die? Sure, shredding and scattering their remains is a temporary solution. I say temporary because once you understand eternity, you understand that if something may happen, then it will. And that's a certainty. The problem is that with no one dying, there's just simply too many of us. As long as there are still humans and animals, we'll hunt them down, and our numbers will grow. No one will think twice to drain a human instead of enduring starvation. We could of course wipe out everything. That's a step we are not yet ready for, and we may never be. So what do? With vampires unable to find shelter throughout the day, the planet being overcrowded, our scientists have shot a few of us into space to find another world to conquer. If you ask me, it's just a pathetic attempt to pretend like we're trying. Here or there, it doesn't matter. Eternity, remember, will devour the entire world. It doesn't matter if it's a day, a week, a year, or a millennium. It's going to happen. It is certainty. Unless this is the day. I shake my head. Hope is the worst of all evils. I mean, look at this. This is what we eat. What even is this? It's green, and it seems to be moving in that plastic bag. I'm told it's prepared using healthy, natural ingredients only, and it has everything our bodies need. Well, given that our bodies don't need anything in particular to survive, this statement seems to be false in more than one way. And also, what is natural ingredient? I am just checking to make sure I am not eating the remains of a fellow vampire. I wouldn't want to be turned to a living shit either. At some point in time, you learn not to ask too many questions. So, I just grab my food and start walking home. Home. It was once my home. Now I am not even sure if I can call it that. I just know I used to live there with her. I have a painting of her hanging over the wall over my bed. Still, for the life of me, I can't recall her name. I can't remember her voice or smell either. I wonder if my love for her will fade away as well. Eternity puts us all to such cruel tests. She's long gone now, and I'm honestly glad. She is better off leaving this world as an angel, rather than becoming this sick joke of a creature. I touch her face on the canvas. Even as a painting, her face has more life in it than in my gray, scarred hands. The nights are quite short this time of year, and I can feel the sun is about to rise. I draw my curtains and lock the door. It's a little routine I've begun, and I've kept with it for who knows how long. Others may joke if they saw, but I don't care. I kneel down by the bed and start praying. First, I pray for the souls of the forgotten, those who have been turned and are unable to fade away, especially for those who have been turned, without them harming anyone. I am not like them. I have my own castle and room because I ate people. I deserve no mercy. Any thought of mercy wasted on me should be given to those who are in fact innocent. I pray for the world to be strong enough to hold us and to resist us. I pray for it to overcome the endless waves of attacks we make at its existence. I still hope there are creatures out there, living things deserving life. I then pray for the humans who I know are still out there somewhere. I hope that someone or something will guide their paths, guide them to a better world. A world without the likes of me. I pray that no one finds my secret door. Noon opens it. Noon walks down to the basement. Noon lays eyes on the man and women there. Noon finds the children hiding there. Please God, give me strength not to hurt them. Please let me be strong enough to resist the hunger. They will be found eventually. Eternity knows no mercy. Please let me be strong enough to resist until that day comes. Please let me do this one thing for her. It is said in the Bible that one day Jesus will come. He'll descend from the heavens, resurrect the dead, and will bring an eternal kingdom with justice for all. I pray for that day to come, and every night I fall asleep, the thought pierces through my bloodless heart. What if the day has already come? Update 2. It's been about a week since Melissa showed up at my door, and since her visit to my parents, we haven't heard from her again. I almost thought she had gone back to Greg, until today, when she showed up at my workplace to make a scene. It was horrible because she just walked into the building, stood in front of my office, and started shouting about how I had stolen the business right from under her nose by pretending to be a good girl in front of our parents and constantly flattering them to get their approval. Apparently, I was responsible for slandering her by falsely accusing her of harassing me throughout our childhood and even talking to my father to send her to rehab, just to solidify my position as the golden child of the family. She kept ranting that the business should have been hers, but now I was refusing to let her even be a part of it because I was jealous that Greg had chosen her over me. Unlike our parents, who always favored me, and since I wasn't used to being overlooked, I lost it and went off on her. When I heard the shouting, I decided to go out and see it for myself. After calling security, I tried to tell her to shut up, but she kept going for a good few minutes until they finally threw her out of the building. I decided to call my dad before I called the police to get his opinion, and he was furious. He told me to go straight ahead and call the police. Fortunately, when the police arrived, she was still lurking nearby, probably waiting for me to leave the building so she could yell at me or maybe do something worse, like physically attack me. The police took her away and charged her with trespassing and disturbing the peace. These are minor charges, and she'll probably get off with a fine or maybe community service at worst, but it will certainly be on record, and that's never good. I told my dad that she had been charged and arrested, and I expected him to be a bit upset about it, but he just seemed exasperated and said he was tired of dealing with her madness and needed a break from it. Honestly, I feel bad for him because it can't be easy having a daughter like Melissa and being blamed for everything that goes wrong in her life, even though most of the time it's her own fault. Honestly, we've all been really patient. Update 3. Well, I think Melissa has gone back to California because a couple of days have passed, and we haven't heard anything from her, which is strange because we expected her to attack us after her arrest. But my dad asked around, and people told him they saw her heading toward the bus station the other day, so I guess she's gone. Honestly, it's such a relief that she's gone now because I really feared she might try something explosive to get our attention again, and that's always bad news. I'm not sure what she'll do now with Greg's situation, because it seems unlikely she'll get help from anyone else after this. I just hope they both figure something out and get out of this mess. I'm not even being kind or compassionate right now. I have very selfish reasons for saying this because I know if they don't find a way out, they'll just come back here with Greg and bother us more. I don't want that. So honestly, I hope and pray that she or Greg find a job and can support themselves. Anyway, I haven't heard from her for a couple of weeks at least, and I'm relieved that this nightmare is finally over.
Actualización 1. Ha pasado una semana desde mi última publicación y muchas cosas han sucedido. Quiero agradecer a todos por sus consejos y apoyo, realmente me ayudaron a procesar mis emociones y decidir qué hacer. Después de mucho debatir, decidí reunirme con mi familia. Sentí que me lo debía a mí mismo, que debía enfrentarlos y buscar un cierre, aunque no estaba convencido de la reconciliación. Decidimos encontrarnos en un lugar neutral, una cafetería modesta en el pueblo cercano. La elegí porque estaba lo suficientemente lejos de nuestra ciudad natal como para no encontrarnos con nadie que conociéramos, pero lo suficientemente cerca como para que cualquiera pudiera llegar sin mucho esfuerzo. Estaba bastante nervioso el día de la reunión. No había visto a mi familia en 3 años y no sabía qué esperar. Llegué temprano a la cafetería y elegí una mesa en la esquina, donde pudiéramos disfrutar de algo de soledad. Cuando entraron, fue como un golpe en el estómago. Verlos después de 3 años fue muy intenso. Mi madre rompió en lágrimas en el momento en que me vio. Estaba más vieja de lo que recordaba, con más canas y arrugas alrededor de los ojos. Mi padre parecía cansado y agotado, sus hombros caídos como si estuviera cargando un peso enorme. Gemma no pudo mirarme a los ojos al principio. Parecía más pequeña y menos segura que la hermana que recordaba. Nos sentamos y, por un momento, nadie sabía qué decir. Todos comenzaron a hablar a la vez, con disculpas saliendo de sus bocas. Mis padres dijeron que habían fallado como padres, que no me habían confiado y que me echaron. Admitieron que se arrepentían de su decisión todos los días desde entonces, pero el orgullo y la humillación les habían impedido comunicarse antes. Mi padre, que siempre había sido un hombre de pocas palabras, habló durante horas sobre cómo había repetido esos días en su cabeza tratando de entender cómo pudo haber sido tan ciego. Afirmó que siempre se había enorgullecido de ser justo y razonable, pero que las emociones nublaron su juicio cuando más lo necesitaba. Mi madre, entre lágrimas, me dijo cómo había mantenido mi habitación exactamente como la había dejado, esperando que algún día regresara. Contó cómo se despertaba en medio de la noche pensando que me escuchaba llegar a casa, solo para darse cuenta de lo que había sucedido. Gemma estalló en lágrimas, diciendo que nunca se perdonaría por acusarme y dañar nuestra relación. Mencionó cómo siempre me había admirado cuando éramos niños, aunque yo era más joven. Admitió que había estado tan preocupada por su propia vida y problemas que había perdido de vista lo que realmente importaba. Mientras hablaban, los recuerdos de nuestra infancia regresaron a mi mente. Recordé cómo Gemma me defendió cuando me molestaban en la escuela secundaria. Reflexioné sobre todas las veces que reímos juntos, compartimos secretos y nos apoyamos mutuamente en momentos difíciles. Eso hizo que la traición doliera aún más, pero también me recordó los momentos fantásticos que habíamos tenido. Escuché todo lo que dijeron, pero no pude perdonarlos aún. El dolor y el resentimiento de esos 3 años seguían demasiado frescos. Les informé que necesitaba tiempo para procesarlo todo. Parecieron entender y no insistieron más. Mi madre quería abrazarme antes de que nos fuéramos, pero me aparté. No estaba preparado para esa cercanía aún. La mirada de dolor en su rostro casi me convenció de cambiar mi decisión, pero me mantuve firme. Necesitaba protegerme emocionalmente. Después de la reunión, regresé a mi apartamento y reflexioné cuidadosamente sobre lo que quería. Quería regresar a mi vida anterior. ¿Podría confiar en ellos nuevamente? ¿Valía la pena intentar reparar nuestra relación? Reconocí que, aunque extrañaba tener una familia, también había crecido significativamente en los 3 años anteriores. Me había vuelto autosuficiente, fuerte, y había creado una vida para mí mismo desde cero. Ya no era la misma persona a la que habían echado 3 años antes. Pensaba en mi trabajo en el almacén, en mi educación en línea y en los amigos que había hecho. Había trabajado duro para llegar a donde estaba y me sentía orgulloso de lo que había logrado por mí mismo. La idea de abandonar todo eso y regresar a mi antigua vida me resultaba horrible. Al mismo tiempo, no podía negar que ver a mi familia había desatado una variedad de sentimientos. A pesar de todo, todavía los quería y los extrañaba. Me preguntaba si podría tener una relación con ellos mientras mantenía mi independencia. Después de varios días de deliberación, tomé una decisión. Llamé a mis padres y les expliqué que, aunque apreciaba sus disculpas, no estaba aún listo para reconciliarme por completo. Les dije que necesitaba más tiempo y espacio para sanar. También establecí algunos límites. Les indiqué que estaba dispuesto a mantener un contacto mínimo con ellos, pero que no regresaría a casa ni pretendería que no había pasado nada. Les dije que si íbamos a continuar nuestra relación, tendría que ser bajo mis condiciones. Ellos expresaron su decepción, pero dijeron que lo entendían. Prometieron respetar mis límites y darme el tiempo que necesitaba. Mi madre me preguntó si podría llamarme una vez a la semana para saber cómo estaba, y acepté, pensando que sería una buena manera de restablecer gradualmente la confianza. En cuanto a Gemma, decidí mantener la distancia por ahora. Sus acciones me habían afectado más que las de los demás, y no estaba listo para perdonarla todavía. Le dije que necesitaba más tiempo antes de poder considerar tener otra relación con ella. Ella se mostró molesta, pero explicó que entendía y esperaría hasta que yo estuviera listo. Ha sido una semana difícil, con muchos altibajos emocionales. Ha habido momentos en los que he dudado de mi decisión, preguntándome si estoy siendo demasiado duro o si estoy perdiendo la oportunidad de reunirme con mi familia. Pero luego recuerdo lo rápido que se volvieron contra mí y me doy cuenta de que estoy haciendo lo correcto al tomar las cosas con calma. También comencé a investigar opciones terapéuticas. Muchos de ustedes lo sugirieron en los comentarios, y creo que sería beneficioso hablar con un profesional mientras navego por esta situación tan complicada. Nunca había ido a terapia antes, así que estoy un poco nervioso, pero creo que podría ser útil para mí. Por ahora, mi enfoque principal está en mi trabajo y mis estudios. Tengo un proyecto importante en el trabajo y estoy decidido a no dejar que todo este drama familiar me distraiga de mis metas. También estoy pensando en mudarme a un mejor departamento. He estado ahorrando y creo que estoy listo para tener un lugar propio, sin compañeros de cuarto. Gracias de nuevo por su apoyo, es reconfortante saber que hay personas allá afuera que me comprenden y se preocupan, aunque nunca nos hayamos conocido. Proporcionaré una actualización si algo importante cambia.
Am I the asshole for finding it hilarious that my ex-husband cheated on his mistress? So, here's the deal. I, 30F, divorced my ex-husband, 31M, several years ago after enduring 7 years of emotional and financial abuse, plus him having multiple affairs. He had no interest in custody of our kids, an 8-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter, so I have sole custody. The final straw that led to the divorce was that he got one of his mistresses pregnant. At the time, this mistress was actually someone I worked with. She was a nurse at the hospital where I was employed. Once everything fell apart, I switched hospitals within the same healthcare system, left the toxic relationship behind, worked on myself in therapy, found peace and healing, got remarried, and started a much happier chapter of my life. I haven't really spoken to my ex in years. However, since I used to work with the mistress, I still have friends at that hospital. Occasionally, I'll get a text with some gossip or drama about my ex and his mistress. I usually find it funny and laugh it off, then move on with my day. For some context, both the mistress and I are ER nurses and my ex is a paramedic, so we all work together in this toxic, high-stress environment. Anyway, the other day, one of my old colleagues texted me to tell me that my ex was cheating on his mistress with another nurse in the ER. And suddenly, all this old anger and frustration I didn't even know was still inside me came flooding back. It was like, I knew he wouldn't change. I felt this strange mixture of satisfaction and anger, thinking about how she would soon find out what he was really like and experience the same pain I had all those years ago. I guess part of me was like, what goes around comes around, and a little bit of karma's a bitch. I asked my friend if the mistress knew yet, and she said as far as anyone knew, she had no idea. Apparently, the nurse he was cheating with had told someone else in the ER, and that person had spread the word to the entire department. I then called my best friend, who is also a paramedic, to laugh about the situation. After listening to me rant for a bit, she suggested she could tell the mistress about what was happening. My best friend was with me through everything during the divorce, and she knows how badly I was hurt by both my ex and his mistress. She was furious on my behalf, and I guess we both wanted some kind of poetic justice. So, she reached out to the mistress using a fake number, gave her all the details of the affair, and provided some evidence. The mistress and my friend exchanged some texts, so I know she got the message. Now I'm sitting here feeling a mix of satisfaction and guilt. On one hand, I know I shouldn't have been as invested in the situation, but on the other hand, I can't help but feel a little vindicated knowing that my ex is getting a taste of his own medicine. I realize that he's mostly to blame for the affair, but the mistress knew about me. She knew who I was and still chose to get involved with him. So I feel like she deserved to know the truth. So, the question is, am I the asshole for ensuring that the mistress found out about his affair with the other nurse? Or should I have just let her find out on her own, eventually? Am I the asshole for never giving away anything to my neighbor? I live in a large, upper-middle-class neighborhood with around 1,500 homes. We have a few Facebook groups where neighbors often give things away, sell items, offer services, or ask for help. The community is generally very friendly and generous. People frequently post about items they no longer need, and it's common to see someone offering free goods, whether it's baby gear, household items, or even tickets to local events. About a year ago, when I was 1 month postpartum, I decided to give away all the formula samples I had received in the mail and from my OBGYN. I had around 8 small cans of various formulas, so I made a post in the Facebook group offering them for free. Sarah, one of my neighbors, was the first to comment on the post. However, I didn't check the post for a while, and I ended up receiving a message from another neighbor. I responded to her first, and she came to pick up the formula. Afterward, I marked the Facebook post as claimed. That's when Sarah messaged me, upset that she had been the first to comment and had been waiting all day for me to reach out. She said she really needed the formula for her baby. I apologized and explained that I responded to the first person who messaged me, not the one who commented first. I didn't think it was a big deal at the time. After all, I figured whoever was quickest to message me would get it. But Sarah was quite upset and didn't seem to understand. She said it wasn't fair, and I felt uncomfortable with her tone, so I just dropped it, thinking that it was a misunderstanding that would blow over. A few months later, there was another post in the Facebook group offering a jogging stroller for free. I commented on the post, and of course Sarah did too. The person offering it responded to me quickly, saying that the stroller had already been claimed. I didn't think much of it until later when Sarah messaged me accusing me of picking up the stroller. I told her that I hadn't taken it and that the post said it was claimed by someone else. She seemed convinced that I had taken it, even though I had no idea where the stroller was or who had picked it up. She said she had walked a mile to get the stroller, only to find that it wasn't there, and she was really upset. I repeated that I didn't take it, and I suggested that she reach out to the person giving it away. She kept pressing me, saying that I should have let her know if I had taken it, as she needed it. Eventually, she stopped messaging me, but the whole situation felt strange. It was clear to me that Sarah didn't really need the stroller. She just seemed frustrated that she wasn't getting what she wanted. Fast forward to today. I received a complimentary museum ticket from my work. However, I knew I wouldn't be able to use it before it expired, so I decided to post it in the Facebook group, offering it for free. Sarah, of course, was the first to comment. But then, a friend of mine texted me, saying she saw the post and was interested in the ticket. Since it was a small, inexpensive ticket, only worth about $15 to $20, I decided to give it to my friend, who I actually know and like, instead of Sarah. I deleted the post and sent the ticket to my friend. Soon after, Sarah messaged me, furious that I didn't give her the ticket. She reminded me that she was the first to comment, and that it wasn't fair that I gave it to someone else. I explained that I gave it to my friend because she wanted it, and because I personally know her. I felt that, since it wasn't much money, I could at least give it to someone I had a personal connection with. But Sarah didn't take it well. She went off on me, calling me inconsiderate, and then blocked me. I was taken aback because, honestly, I've never even met her in person. Now, my husband says I'm the asshole for not giving the ticket to Sarah, especially since she was first to comment and because I've never given her anything before. He thinks I should have honored the first to comment rule. But I disagree. We live in a neighborhood where generosity is common, and I don't want to just give things away to anyone who happens to comment first. I've never seen Sarah post that she needs anything specific, but she often seems to try to grab anything that's free. I'd rather give my things to people I actually know and feel comfortable with. To me, it's about the connection, not just about following an unspoken rule. I just don't think Sarah is entitled to everything she asks for. So, am I the asshole for giving my things away to other people instead of honoring the first to comment unspoken rule? Am I the asshole for throwing away a stupid scarf? So, here's the situation. My mother-in-law, Maëlle, stayed with us over the weekend, and the entire time, she made horrible comments about me, my family, and especially our 18-year-old daughter, who is a senior in high school. It all started on Saturday. My daughter had to work a double shift at her restaurant job, and when she came home, she was so tired that she fell asleep on the couch while watching TV. Maëlle was staying in the guest room, and since my daughter was sleeping on the couch, Mal decided it was a good opportunity to snoop through my daughter's room while we were all asleep. What Mal found was a box of condoms in my daughter's sock drawer. The box had been given to her by my husband and me when she started dating her boyfriend, and the box was unopened. We gave it to her because, at the end of the day, teenagers are going to make their own decisions, and we want her to be safe. We're not religious, but our daughter is. She's been going to church with her friends since 7th grade and has a great sense of community there. She's also a virgin and wants to wait until marriage or until she feels like she's with someone long-term. She's only been dating her boyfriend for 6 months. And again, the box was unopened. So, back to the incident. Mal found the condoms and started screaming at my daughter, waking her up at 1 a.m. She called her every name in the book. My husband and I didn't even know this was happening because our room is on a different floor. We only found out after Mal went home, when our daughter told us about the whole thing. On Sunday, my daughter and her boyfriend were going to the movies. She wore a dress that was slightly above her knees with leggings underneath because it was cold. Mal, being the wonderful person she is, tugged on my daughter's skirt and said, "Put on something proper. It's inappropriate going to the movies dressed like a little whore, dear." At that point, my husband told Mal it was time for her to leave. She packed up all of her stuff and left, and I was fuming. Later that night, I went into the guest room to tidy up, and I saw that Mal had left behind a scarf. I was so pissed about the way she had treated my daughter that I threw it away. The next day, Mal called my husband asking about the scarf, and he told her he hadn't seen it. I overheard him on the phone and casually mentioned, "Yeah, I threw that stupid scarf away." Now my husband is beyond pissed at me because apparently, the scarf was a gift from his late aunt. But honestly, I feel like what Mal did to my daughter was so much worse than throwing away a scarf. So, am I the asshole for throwing away the scarf? Am I the asshole for not attending my best friend's wedding? I, 25F, have been best friends with Louise, 25F, for almost 20 years. We've had our ups and downs over the years, like when we went to different universities, but we've always remained close. Louise has always dreamed of a Christmas wedding. One with snow, pictures by the Christmas tree, all the classic romantic stuff. When she got engaged last Christmas, she immediately started planning her dream wedding and asked me to be a bridesmaid, which I was beyond excited about. The problem started when she announced that the wedding was set for Christmas Day. Yes, December 25th. I was shocked. I knew she loved Christmas, but I didn't think she would actually set the date for the holiday itself. To be honest, I didn't even know it was possible to get married on Christmas Day. I immediately expressed my concern, not just for myself, but for other guests as well. Christmas is such a family-focused day, and it seemed like an odd choice for a wedding. Since she's my best friend, I wanted to support her. But then I realized that this would be my daughter's first Christmas, and I simply couldn't miss that. As any parent will understand, a baby's first Christmas is a really big deal, and I wanted to make special memories with my family. The wedding is also in Edinburgh. We live in London, so I wouldn't even be able to attend part of the wedding and then rush home to do Christmas traditions with my family. Louise had chosen Edinburgh because she thought it was more magical and romantic, but it makes things even harder logistically. After giving it a lot of thought, I told Louise that I wouldn't be able to attend the wedding but would love to celebrate with her in some other way. She was furious. She said I was being selfish and that Christmas would be her one special day to get married. She also pointed out that I'd have every other Christmas with my daughter, but this would be her only wedding day. The situation got more complicated when other guests began to RSVP saying they wouldn't be able to attend either, and Louise got even angrier. I feel guilty because I want to be there for her, but at the same time, I can't justify missing my daughter's first Christmas. So, am I the asshole? Am I really being as selfish as Louise says I am? I feel torn, but I just can't imagine missing my daughter's first Christmas for a wedding. Am I the asshole for refusing to cook a 3-course vegan meal for my parents, even though I'm hosting? I, 26F, have always been passionate about cooking, but my relationship with food and my parents has been complicated. My parents, 60-62, are terrible cooks. They learned at some point that everything needs to be boiled for 20 minutes. This resulted in a childhood full of mushy vegetables, overcooked pasta, rice that was more porridge than grains, and many soups that consisted of just noodles and broth. Most of the meals were either fried or bland, and to this day, my parents still don't know much about cooking. I started cooking my own food at 14, mostly out of necessity, but also because I began enjoying it. At 16, after the family pet passed away, I decided to go vegan, but my parents didn't let me. They forced me to cook meat and fish dishes for them until I turned 18. Once I had the freedom to cook for myself, I dove deeper into veganism and started experimenting more with flavors, spices, and different cuisines. Over time, I've developed a solid cooking skill set, but my parents have always been critical of my food choices. They call my meals weird, exotic, or too much, because I don't stick to traditional meals and love to experiment with spices. I wouldn't say I'm a professional chef, but I'm a far cry from the overcooked, bland meals they served when I was younger. Now, I'm living in the UK with my boyfriend. My parents and brother are visiting for the holidays, and while they'll be staying at a hotel, we're planning to have meals together at my place and some at restaurants. When my mom called recently to ask what I'll be preparing, I was a little surprised when she said she was excited to try the food. She mentioned that she wanted to experiment more and hoped to bring my dad out of his comfort zone. This sounded promising, especially since I've tried on multiple occasions to get them to try my meals, sometimes as birthday requests, sometimes just to share my experiments. Every time, though, they end up criticizing my cooking. They've called my food too healthy, even though I don't eat healthy all the time. They've complained about the spices, about the ingredients, and when we've gone to vegan restaurants, which is rare, they've sulked and barely touched their meals. Food waste has also been a huge issue for me. Seeing my meals go to waste when they don't even try them is honestly distressing. To add to this, my mom constantly asks me to cook for her when I visit home. Sometimes I'm happy to, but it feels weird, and she gets mad if I refuse. I'm just tired of this dynamic, and it's been hard to shake the feeling that they resent me for not being grateful for the meals they used to make me. Now, with the holidays coming up, my mom is asking me to prepare a 3-course vegan meal for the family: appetizers, main course, and dessert. This just feels like a lot to me. I'm not sure if I'm being too sensitive, but I really don't want to spend Christmas listening to my dad and brother complain about the food, my mom making passive-aggressive comments about how weird the food is, and then seeing everything go to waste. The pressure to prepare a special meal, especially when I know it won't be appreciated, makes me feel overwhelmed. The holidays already bring a lot of spending, and I don't want to feel bad about wasting food on top of it. Honestly, I'd rather tell them to just buy their usual pre-made Christmas meals, the ones they're comfortable with. I want to avoid the stress and disappointment, and it feels like the easiest option. My boyfriend, on the other hand, thinks I should just cook the meal since we are hosting and had already chosen some recipes we were excited to cook together. He wants to make the holiday special, and I do too, but I just don't want it to turn into a situation where I'm spending all this time and energy making food that won't be appreciated. So, am I the asshole for refusing to cook a 3-course vegan meal for my parents? Even though I'm hosting and they're excited about it, should I just go ahead and cook? Or is it okay to set some boundaries and not cater to their preferences this time? Edit asterisk to clarify, I'm happy to cook and share meals with my parents when they show an interest in trying new things, or when they are open-minded about food. But based on past experiences, I just feel like this is a repeat of the same frustrating pattern, and I'm concerned it will lead to more criticism and food waste. I want to have a peaceful holiday, not one filled with passive-aggressive remarks and wasted food. Am I the asshole for calling the police about the deranged sounds coming from my neighbor's apartment? I'm a woman in my 50s and I live in a small building where my neighbor, John, a man in his 20s, and I have always had a fairly neutral, neighborly relationship. We text occasionally about building issues or sign for each other's packages. Nothing beyond that. We weren't friends, but we got along just fine. One afternoon over the summer, I was taking a nap when I was suddenly awakened by an incredibly disturbing sound. It was a high-pitched, keening wail that sounded like it could be either an animal or a human in extreme distress. It was so unsettling that it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I went out into the hall, and a few other neighbors were already gathered, equally confused and alarmed by the sound. We quickly determined that the noise was coming from John's apartment, but we couldn't figure out what was causing it. John didn't have a pet, which made the whole situation even stranger. The sounds continued for at least 90 minutes, and it sounded like either an injured or dying animal, or worse, a person in distress. I texted and called John multiple times, leaving messages about the sounds and expressing my concern, but I got no response. By this point, the other neighbors were also freaked out and suggested we should call the police to make sure no one, or no animal, was in danger in his apartment. I texted John one last time to let him know I was about to call 911. I didn't know what else to do. I called the police, explained the situation, and they could even hear the sounds in the background. Shortly after, John called me back, sounding very angry. He yelled, "You called the police? What were you thinking? I'll take care of it." About 20 minutes later, a man arrived at the building and opened the door to John's apartment. As soon as the door opened, the sound stopped, and an adorable bulldog came running out, wagging its tail. The man, who I assume was renting the apartment from John through some Airbnb-type arrangement, got on the phone and started arguing with John. I overheard him saying things like, "Well, you didn't say anything about pets." Apparently, John hadn't mentioned the dog, which is why we were all so confused by the distressing noises. I immediately called 911 back to let them know everything had been resolved, and the operator said everything was fine and no police would be coming. After that, I assumed everything was over, but then, about an hour later, John showed up at my door, furious. He was pounding on it, yelling about me calling the police. I explained again that it wasn't just me who was concerned. Several neighbors had gathered, and we were all worried about the strange sounds coming from his apartment. Since then, John has completely ignored me. He doesn't reply to any of my messages, and he doesn't even acknowledge me when I see him in the hall. It feels like he now views me as some kind of troublemaker, and I can't help but feel guilty. I'm also worried that he might think I acted insensitively as a white person calling the police on him, a black man, when that can have tragic consequences in this country. I am black as well, but at the time, my only concern was the strange, painful-sounding noise coming from his apartment. The situation scared me, and I felt that calling the police was the right thing to do. But now I'm wondering if I overreacted and whether I handled it in the wrong way. So, am I the asshole for calling the police about the disturbing sounds coming from my neighbor's apartment? Am I the asshole for skipping Christmas after my parents' divorce? I, 30F, don't want to go home for Christmas this year. My parents got divorced this summer after a long series of cheating, separation, and dysfunction. My dad blames my mom entirely for the divorce, insisting his infidelity was just flirting and that she is the one who pushed him to do it, which is a blatant lie. For me, my breaking point wasn't just his cheating, it was the verbal abuse he directed at both my mother and me and my sisters over the years. After years of enduring his emotional manipulation and cruelty, I finally went semi-no contact with him. I didn't fully cut him off, though, because my mom asked me not to. I try to be civil at family events, keeping the peace because I don't want to make things worse for anyone else. But I never expected my dad to be involved in holiday celebrations after the divorce. Yet here he is, still planning to join us for Christmas, and it's making me dread the whole thing. To make matters worse, I recently had a fight with my mom, and she told me that while I'm loved, I'm not liked because I'm too difficult. My sister also jumped in during the argument, telling me that nobody in the family likes or loves me. She never apologized for saying this, and while we've since talked things through, it still really stings. There's this kernel of truth in what they said that I can't shake off. Maybe I am too difficult, but I feel like nobody really makes an effort to meet me halfway. I feel isolated and overlooked in my own family, and it's hard not to react to that. So now Christmas is coming up, and I'm torn. I love my grandfather, he's 97 and still doing well, and I feel obligated not to hurt my mom. But I also can't shake the feeling that if I go home, I'm just going to end up trapped in more emotional turmoil, surrounded by people who I feel don't really care about me. I don't want to spend the holiday dealing with my dad's presence, my mom's frustration, and the general negativity that has surrounded our family for so long. Is it wrong for me to want to skip Christmas this year? I know it would hurt my mom, but I feel like I need to take care of myself for once. especially with everything that's gone down this year. Am I the asshole for opting out of family Christmas? Should I just push through for my grandfather and my mom? Or is it okay to prioritize my own mental health for a change? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my parents see a picture of my boyfriend or talk about him anymore? I, 22F, recently started dating my boyfriend, 20M, and we're in a long-distance relationship. We've been dating for a couple of months, and we met in real life about 2 months ago. For the first time, I decided to tell my parents about my relationship because I'm really serious about him, but their reaction has been less than supportive. When I told them, they seemed kind of annoyed, and since then, whenever I've mentioned my boyfriend, they've made negative comments about him, despite never meeting him or knowing much about him. For example, when my father noticed I was wearing a ring that my boyfriend gave me, he asked if it was a real diamond. When I said no, he started saying that if my boyfriend really loved me, he would have bought a real diamond ring instead of a fake one, implying that he doesn't have money for a real one. Another time, I told my mom that I bought my boyfriend Christmas presents, and she started saying that my boyfriend was Muslim, he's not, and that he would force me to convert. I corrected her, saying that he's actually Buddhist just like her, but she kept insisting that I wouldn't be able to eat pork anymore because of him. My mom has also repeatedly asked about his skin color, which I find really strange considering we are Asian ourselves, and I've already told her that my boyfriend is also Asian. These comments have been hurtful, and I finally decided to bring it up to my mom. I told her that these comments bothered me and that I didn't want to talk about my boyfriend with her anymore if it was going to be like this. Instead of respecting my feelings, my mom accused me of loving my boyfriend more than I love her and my dad. She even said that boys will try to gain your trust so they can sell you off, which I found completely inappropriate and insulting. I tried to explain that the point wasn't about my boyfriend, but how her comments were upsetting me. She then claimed I was just upset because I told my boyfriend what she said, which wasn't true. I tried to tell her it was my feelings that were hurt, but she kept deflecting and focusing on my boyfriend's supposed reaction. In the end, I told her that I wouldn't share pictures of my boyfriend with her or talk about him anymore unless she could respect my wishes and stop making these hurtful comments. I told her that I needed her to respect my relationship and my boundaries. Now I'm wondering, am I the asshole for refusing to let my parents see a picture of my boyfriend or talk about him anymore? I just don't want to deal with this negativity anymore, and I feel like I've tried to communicate my feelings, but it's not being respected. Am I the asshole for making my younger siblings do things for me? I'm the oldest sister in my household, and I help take care of my 2 younger siblings who are 8 and 11. My older sister recently got married and moved out, so now I'm the one who handles a lot of the daily responsibilities. If my younger siblings are hungry, I usually make them food. If they want to play a game that I'm not particularly fond of, I play along just to spend time with them. I also help with things like getting them ready for school, making sure they finish their homework, or making sure they have everything they need for the day. I don't mind helping them, but in return, I do ask for small favors here and there. For example, if I'm in my room and I need something like the fan, I'll ask them to grab it for me. Or if I'm busy and need a glass of water, I'll ask them to bring me one. These are really simple requests, and I don't ask them to do anything huge or time-consuming. I try to keep things balanced, so I'm not always asking them to do things for me. But when I do, it's usually in exchange for the things I do for them, like cooking or playing games they enjoy. However, my mom seems to have an issue with this. She's always complaining when I ask my siblings to do these little things for me. She says I shouldn't be making them do tasks, even though it's never anything major and I always accept it if they say no. I just feel like, because I'm always helping them with so much, it's only fair that I ask for a few small things in return. But my mom thinks I'm taking advantage of them and that I should be doing everything myself, even if it's something as small as fetching a fan or getting a glass of water. I've noticed that when my older brother still lived with us, or even when my sister lived here, I would do much more for them, like taking on bigger responsibilities or helping with their chores. My mom never had an issue with that. She even encouraged me to help out more. But now, when I ask my younger siblings to do simple things, she acts like I'm asking for way too much. I don't know if I'm just being a typical sibling or if I'm actually crossing some line by asking them to do things for me. I try to make sure they don't feel burdened and that I'm not bossing them around. It's just hard for me to see the difference between what I do for them and what they do for me, especially when it comes to chores and taking care of each other. I feel like it's normal sibling behavior to ask for a favor now and then, but I'm unsure if I'm overstepping. So, am I the asshole for asking my younger siblings to do small things for me? Am I the asshole for refusing to babysit my cousin and calling him a lying brat, even though it lets my aunt work extra and helps her family? I'm 15 years old, and my Aunt Cassandra, who's 48, has a son named Tristan, who's 12. Tristan is honestly a nightmare to be around, and it's been affecting me more and more lately. My mom started asking me to babysit him so Aunt Cassandra could pick up extra work. The idea was that I'd watch Tristan while my aunt worked, which would help her family financially. But over time, I've realized that babysitting him is a lot more trouble than it's worth. Tristan has this pattern of lying to his mom about me, and unfortunately, she always believes him. He knows that if he complains enough, she'll buy him a gift to make it up to him. It's pretty manipulative, and I don't know how to get through to her. One example of this happened last Friday when I was babysitting him. I refused to give him his phone until he finished his homework, which Aunt Cassandra had specifically told me to do. Instead of doing his homework, Tristan threw a massive tantrum. He screamed, yelled, and made all kinds of accusations about me. The last time I babysat him, he claimed that I had friends over and destroyed the house, which was totally false. To protect myself, I decided to record everything on my phone, just in case he lied again. I showed the recording to Aunt Cassandra, hoping it would clear things up, but instead, she blamed me. She said that Tristan doesn't like being recorded, and that's why he acted out. She didn't care that he was lying again. It was incredibly frustrating. I've tried talking to my mom about how I don't want to babysit Tristan anymore because every time I do, I get punished for his lies. But she just brushes it off, saying that kids his age are like that and that I babysit other kids, so this should be no different. I was already fed up, but last Friday really pushed me over the edge. After showing my mom the video and explaining everything, she still took Aunt Cassandra's side. She said that my aunt really needs the extra income, and the money helps her family. She also insisted that I should be a dependable babysitter for the sake of family. We had a big argument because my mom asked me to babysit Tristan again this Friday. I told her no and said that I was done. I told her that Tristan is a lying little brat, and that maybe Aunt Cassandra should try babysitting him herself to understand how hard it is. I think I also mentioned that maybe the reason she can't keep a babysitter is because she refuses to discipline him. That's when my mom grounded me. Now I'm just feeling really frustrated. This whole situation has been going on since summer, and I'm at my breaking point. I've tried to be patient, but I'm done. I really don't want to keep babysitting Tristan anymore, especially since it's clear my aunt and mom don't care about the truth or how I feel. So, am I the asshole for finally refusing to babysit Tristan and for calling him a lying brat, even though Aunt Cassandra's extra money is helping her family? Am I the asshole for refusing to house sit for my friend after I found out they got a cat? I, 28M, agreed to house sit for my friend Alex, 30M, while they went on a week-long vacation. Alex has a dog, which I've always loved, and I thought it would be a nice thing to do to help them out. I even took some time off work to make sure I could give the dog plenty of attention during their absence. A few days before Alex left, I went over to pick up the house keys and get a rundown of what needed to be done while they were away. That's when Alex casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, we got a cat." This immediately caught me off guard because I'm severely allergic to cats. Alex knows this. I've had to leave gatherings early before because of my allergies, and they've seen me react to cat dander. So, when Alex casually dropped the bomb, I asked why they hadn't mentioned it earlier. They said they'd only had the cat for about a month and forgot to mention it to me. At this point, I told Alex I couldn't house sit for them anymore. Even if I avoided the cat, just being in the house with the dander would trigger my allergies, and I didn't want to risk it. I suggested that they ask someone else to take care of the dog or hire a professional sitter, but Alex got defensive, saying that I was leaving them in a lurch right before their trip. I felt bad about that, but I didn't think it was fair for Alex to spring this on me at the last minute when they knew about my allergy. I offered to check in on the dog every day and help out in some way, But Alex said that wouldn't work since they needed someone to stay at the house full-time. They ended up scrambling to find someone else, and when they left for their trip, they were pretty angry with me. A mutual friend later told me that I should have just sucked it up for a week because Alex really needed the break, and they probably just forgot to mention the cat in the first place. I've been feeling a little guilty, like maybe I overreacted or should have just pushed through for a week to help out my friend. So, now I'm wondering, am I the asshole for refusing to house sit for Alex after I found out about the cat, even though they really needed the help? Or should I have just dealt with my allergies for the sake of their vacation? Am I the asshole for refusing to change my wedding date because my best friend is pregnant? I, 24F, got engaged to my fiancé, Luke, 27M, last year, and we've been planning our wedding for over a year now. Our wedding is set for early September, and everything is basically planned: venue, dress, catering, the works. My best friend, Sarah, 26F, is my maid of honor, and she's been really involved in the planning. I couldn't imagine my wedding day without her there. However, there's been a complication. Sarah recently found out she's pregnant and is due at the end of August. She told me about it last week and was really excited, but then she said, "So, I guess we need to figure out a new wedding date." I was really confused and asked what she meant. She explained that she likely wouldn't be able to attend the wedding because she'd either be in the hospital giving birth or recovering with a newborn. I understood that this was a huge life event for her, but I told her there was no way we could change the wedding date. We've already made significant payments, deposits, save the dates, and other non-refundable costs are all locked in. Sarah got really upset and said something like, "But I'm your best friend. How can you have your wedding without me there?" I tried to explain that it's not about not wanting her there. It's just that everything is set in stone, and changing the date would result in losing thousands of dollars and a lot of stress. She became even more upset, accusing me of valuing money over our friendship. She said, "If the roles were reversed, I'd move mountains to make sure you could be there for my big day." I tried to offer alternatives to make her feel included. I suggested that we could set up a live stream of the ceremony for her, or we could plan a special dinner after the baby is born to celebrate with her. But she shut that down, saying it wouldn't be the same as physically having her at the wedding. She also told me it was selfish of me not to understand that this was a once-in-a-lifetime moment for her too, becoming a mother for the first time and being part of my wedding day. To make matters more complicated, Sarah has started rallying some of our mutual friends, and now they all think I'm the villain. Some of them have said things like, "It's just a wedding, but a baby is forever," or "This is a sign you care more about the event than the people in your life." One friend even suggested I have a smaller, symbolic ceremony later in the year so Sarah could attend, but that idea feels ridiculous to me given how much we've already invested in the wedding and how much work has gone into planning it. Meanwhile, my mom and fiancé are both firmly on my side. My mom even said it was entitled of Sarah to expect me to rearrange everything for her, especially since she didn't consult me before deciding to have a baby, though, of course, she didn't need my permission. Luke thinks I should let Sarah cool off and focus on enjoying my wedding with the people who can be there. I feel really torn about the whole thing. I don't want to hurt Sarah, but I also feel like this is my wedding, and it's not fair to expect me to rearrange everything for something that was out of my control. I've tried to make compromises, but nothing seems to be good enough for her. So, am I being selfish for refusing to change the date of my wedding? Am I the asshole for snapping at my friend for touching my curly hair while it was drying and ruining it? I'm 23 years old, and I've had very curly hair my entire life. I'm white, but my hair is a 3C curl pattern, which is pretty tightly coiled. It's a part of me, and I take good care of it. Growing up, it was a source of insecurity because people constantly judged me for it, laughed at me, and honestly touched it without permission. It's something I've learned to love, but I also find it really triggering when people touch my hair without asking. I know a lot of curly-haired people will understand how delicate curls can be, how easily they can be ruined by one wrong move. Once it's messed up, it's really hard to fix. I put a lot of effort into making sure my hair looks good, and if someone ruins it, it takes a lot of work to restore it. So, this weekend, my friend, who's also 23, was over at my place. I had just showered and was letting my hair air dry. It was in that awkward in-between stage where it's not quite dry and not quite wet. For curly hair people, that stage can look weird, kind of flat and awkward, but I wait until it's fully dry to style it. While I was standing there, minding my business, my friend came up behind me and started scrunching my hair and running her fingers through it. My heart sank. I almost started crying. I immediately snapped at her and said something like, "What the hell? You just totally ruined my hair." I know I was rude, but honestly, I just couldn't help it. She didn't understand how much work it takes to get my hair to look the way I want it, and now I had to fix what she'd done. My friend didn't get why I was so upset. She told me I was being crazy and needed to chill out about my hair. She apologized, but was still frustrated that I'd gotten so mad. She said it wasn't a big deal, but to me it is a big deal. I explained how frustrating it is to spend hours on a wash day routine just to have someone mess it up with a single touch. She didn't get it. She just couldn't understand why. It made me so upset. I know I might sound obsessive or like I care too much about my hair, but it's not about being obsessed with having perfect hair. It's just that my hair is super curly and fine, and it doesn't take much to turn it into a frizzy mess. Having someone touch it without asking feels like a violation, especially when I know how hard I work to get it to look the way it does. So, am I the asshole for snapping at my friend, even though she didn't understand why it bothered me so much? Am I the asshole for bringing my daughter to my own child-free wedding? So, my husband, 29M, and I, 27F, just got married. We spent nearly a year planning the perfect wedding, making sure everything was just right. One of the first rules we decided on was a no kids policy. We wanted an adult environment where we didn't have to worry about children running around, getting into things, or crying. We made it very clear on the invitations that we didn't want anyone bringing children under 14. That being said, we did make an exception for our own daughter, who is 11 months old. We decided I would hold her during the reception and photos, and then a family friend would take her home and wait for the babysitter to arrive before coming back. We asked a few people if they would be willing to take care of her for the evening, and one of the people we asked was my husband's close friend Darren's wife, Jessica, fake names. She declined because she didn't want to drive, which was fine as we were able to make other arrangements. Now, here's where things went south. On the day of the wedding, after we had explicitly told everyone several times about the no kids rule, Jessica showed up with her 4-year-old son. I was obviously taken aback, so I went up to her and asked about it. She told me, "Since you're bringing your kid, it's fine if I bring mine." Honestly, I was furious. I tried to stay calm and told her that this was still a child-free wedding, and that her son couldn't be running around. I told her she was welcome to leave him with someone and come back, but if she didn't, she'd have to leave. Jessica started yelling at me, saying that since I had a child, it wasn't fair that she couldn't have hers there. At this point, her son was already climbing on things, running around, and making a mess. I gave her one last warning. Either she would take her son and leave, or I would ask her to leave the venue. She rolled her eyes, sat down, and just let her son run wild. Eventually, her husband Darren managed to convince her to take the kid home, but the damage was done. The first part of my wedding was completely disrupted. Now, a few weeks later, I've been thinking about it, and maybe I am in the wrong. I said no kids at my wedding, but I brought my own. A lot of people in my life have also mentioned that it was hypocritical of me to do so. So, AITA for bringing my daughter to my own child-free wedding? Am I the asshole for not letting my ex-roommate use my Amazon Prime account? I, 18F, was roommates with J, 18F, for part of our first semester in college. In the beginning, everything was great. We hung out a lot, ate together, talked all night, and went shopping. However, things started to change after we both rushed for sororities. I got into the one she wanted, but I ended up getting into a different one. From that point on, she started being a little more distant, though we were still friendly. To give some context, on our shared TV, I paid for several streaming services: Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and Peacock. Jay's parents paid for Max, formerly HBO Max, and Netflix. I didn't mind this arrangement at all because I had some money saved up from a young age and I wanted to enjoy college without worrying about extra expenses. A few weeks into the semester, I found out that Jay had to move out due to health reasons. She had some issues with certain foods and needed to cook for herself, which was fair, though I was a bit upset that she only told me a week before she moved out. She also left all the packing for me to do, while she spent time with her sorority friends. I didn't make a big deal out of it and packed up her stuff because I wanted to be nice. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and she reached out to ask me to log out of her Netflix and Max accounts, which I hadn't used since she moved out. I agreed and did that right away. Then, later that same week, I noticed something strange on my Amazon account. I saw that a gift card I had on there was used up, and some movies were rented. Since I hadn't rented them, I looked into it and saw that Jay had been using my Amazon Prime account. I texted her and asked if she had rented the movies, and she admitted that she did. I asked why she was on my account, and she said that she didn't have an Amazon account of her own and wanted to use mine. I told her that it wasn't fair for her to use my account when I had to log out of her Netflix and Max accounts. She argued that it was different because Netflix was hers but Amazon Prime was ours, meaning she felt entitled to use it even though it was my account and I was the one paying for it. I told her that if she didn't stop using my account, I'd figure out a way to kick her off myself. She refused, so I called my dad for help, and we found a way to secure my account. Jay then called me, screaming that I ruined her movie night with her friends. I told her that if she wanted to watch movies, she should pay for her own account. Now I'm feeling conflicted. I don't think I did anything wrong, but I'm wondering if I was too harsh. Was I wrong for not letting my ex-roommate use my Amazon Prime account? Am I the asshole for making my boyfriend sleep in the living room after his comments about my body and food choices? To give you some background, I, 25F, have been in a relationship with my boyfriend, 26M, for about 11 months now. Throughout our time together, I've been very open with him about my insecurities, especially when it comes to my body. I've never been obese, but I'm not exactly petite either. I've always had a few extra pounds, and although I'm not overweight, I struggle with feeling comfortable in my own skin. I'm 5 feet 11 inches, and I've been taller and bigger than most girls since I was younger. I've never had a perfect body, and I've had to deal with the fact that I don't have a tiny waist or a flat stomach. I'm just regular. Because of this, I'm really sensitive when it comes to any comments about my weight or body shape. A little context on my relationship with food. I have been using a food tracking app, MyFitnessPal, for a while now, trying to eat healthier and stay active. I'm definitely not perfect, but I've been trying to make better choices. I'm not overly obsessed with my weight, but I am focused on my overall health, especially because I struggle with polycystic ovary syndrome, POS, which can mess with my metabolism and make it harder for me to lose weight. So, even when I do indulge or make choices that aren't perfect, I try not to beat myself up about it. Tonight, my boyfriend and I were both working late, and after a long day, I decided to grab a pizza from Hungry Howie's. I had only eaten 2 slices, and the rest I put in the fridge for later. When my boyfriend got home, he saw the pizza box and made a comment like, "Why did you get that big box? Who's going to eat all that?" Now, he's not a huge fan of pizza, especially because he doesn't like the sauce, but I didn't think much of it at first. I just said, I can eat pizza for days, meaning that I would eat it over a couple of days until I got tired of it. But then he started opening his mouth as if he was going to say something else, and after some back and forth, he finally admitted that he was going to say he thought I'd been looking really good lately because I'd been tracking everything I ate, and now he was surprised I was going to eat an entire pizza by myself. Honestly, I was furious. First off, I hadn't even eaten most of the pizza. I had only eaten 2 slices, and it was literally the only thing I'd eaten all day after working a long shift. But his implication that I was going to eat the whole thing just felt so judgmental. It wasn't just the comment about the pizza, but it felt like he was pointing out how I was somehow slipping up when, in reality, I was just having a normal meal after a busy day. I told him that I didn't want him to comment on my body or what I ate anymore. It wasn't okay, and I didn't want to hear that kind of judgment from my partner. Then, I told him to go sleep in the living room for the night because I was so upset. Now, he's acting like I'm the one in the wrong, saying that I've previously told him I wanted a partner who could help me eat healthier and get active. Yes, that's true. I want someone supportive, but not someone who makes me feel gross or judged for having a couple of slices of pizza when I'm just doing my best to take care of myself. A little more context. I'm 5 feet 11 inches and I've fluctuated between 180 and 200 pounds at my heaviest, but it's not like you can really tell when my weight changes. It tends to be pretty evenly distributed across my frame. The number on the scale doesn't bother me that much. I just want to feel healthier overall. And even though I may not make the healthiest choices all the time, I know that my weight can sometimes fluctuate because of my PCOS, and I try to be kind to myself about it. Some of the comments on this post have really upset me, but I just wanted to add that if I were bigger, that doesn't mean people have the right to comment on it or shame me. I'm doing the best I can, and I'd appreciate some respect in return. So, am I the asshole for making my boyfriend sleep in the living room after his comments about my food and body? Am I the asshole for getting a kitchen cart without clearing it with my roommate first? I live in a house with 2 roommates, and while we have a decent-sized kitchen, the counter space is seriously lacking. My roommate Helen uses up a lot of it with her microwave, sous vide machine, and toaster oven. These gadgets take up a ton of space, leaving me with very little room for my cooking and ingredient prep. I also enjoy baking bread, which is really hard to do when there's barely any counter space left to knead dough. After struggling with the lack of space, I decided to buy a rolling kitchen cart to give me extra room for food prep and cooking. I thought it was a practical solution to our shared space problem. However, when Helen saw it, she got really upset and assumed it was a personal jab at her. She thinks that I got the cart specifically to make a point about her occupying too much of the kitchen. A bit more context. Helen has an autoimmune disorder that affects her diet, and she bought the sous vide machine and toaster oven because they help her prepare food that's safe for her to eat. This has led to several arguments between us, as she often uses these gadgets only once or twice a week, but they take up a large portion of the kitchen all the time. Meanwhile, I'm left with little space to prepare my meals and store my appliances. We've even had a disagreement over whether I should store my rice cooker when I'm not using it. The main issue is that whenever we try to talk about how to share the kitchen space, Helen uses her illness to justify the disproportionate space she takes up. It feels like her needs always trump mine and my other roommates, and that leaves me frustrated. Since I bought the cart, Helen has been avoiding me, and now she's asking if I can return it because she sees it as a passive-aggressive act. I bought the cart to solve a problem I'm facing in the kitchen. With the holidays coming up and a lot of baking ahead, I really need the extra space. But now I'm second-guessing whether I should have cleared the purchase with her first. So, am I the asshole? This situation involves a mix of both practical and emotional challenges. On one hand, you clearly have a valid need for more kitchen space to prepare your meals and do the things you enjoy, like baking. On the other hand, Helen's illness has clearly made her sensitive to anything that might feel like a slight against her or her need for space. It seems like a classic case of 2 people having valid but conflicting needs and struggling to communicate about them. That said, where you might have gone wrong is not discussing the kitchen cart with Helen first, especially since she has a history of feeling like her needs are being overlooked. While you're not wrong to seek out more space for yourself, she might have felt blindsided or like you were undermining her struggles by introducing a solution without first discussing it. Given the ongoing tension between your needs and hers, talking things out before making a decision that directly impacts both of you could have helped avoid this conflict. I, 25F, read messages between my boyfriend of 8 years, 24 meters, and his female friend, 28F, context. Today, I, 25F, was using my boyfriend's, 24M, computer, and while I was on it, Facebook was open in one of his tabs. I knew I might be crossing a boundary by opening his conversation with someone, but I did it anyway. This person is a female friend of his, a coworker from over a year ago, with whom he's developed a close friendship. They don't work together anymore, but she still frequently initiates plans to spend time together. At first, I thought this was fine, but over time, I've grown increasingly concerned. She often turns to him for emotional support, dating problems, relationship advice, personal issues, and has always referred to him with affectionate terms like, "Dear." She invites him to expensive outings, calls him when she's upset, and seems to rely on him a lot emotionally. I initially tried to brush this off, thinking that her background, she's a single mom and an immigrant who's been through an abusive marriage, might explain her emotional dependence on him. but it's been bothering me more recently, especially with some of the comments she makes, like, do you think someone like you would ever want to marry someone like me? What I found. Today, I opened up their conversation and saw a series of messages that really disturbed me. They had spent time together the previous evening, and in her message, she referred to spending time with a young man and mentioned that she thought she could fall in love with him. She also said she needed more of his hugs and was craving his touch. Then she added, I miss you, to which my boyfriend responded, saying she was sweet and that he missed her too. What makes this especially troubling is that she belongs to a religion where physical contact between unmarried men and women is prohibited. So, even something as simple as a hug between them